Yes.
I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. In attendance for our directors, we have Janet, Alan, Ginny, Lynn, Sherry, Nancy, Dick, Milton, and Andy. Staff, Susan. We will be recording and broadcasting our meetings and streaming on the internet, so just let everybody know that. So the first thing is a motion to hold a closed meeting, basically to consider terms or conditions of a business transaction.
So moved.
Nancy moved. Is Sherry second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, so we'll go upstairs, and we'll be back around 7:30.
Yes.
Okay, we'll missing a few board members, but I want to thank everyone for your patience so we could wrap up this closed meeting, and we will continue with our open meeting. Read our civility principles. Speak kindly, don't speak ill. Accept and give constructive criticism. Apologize earnestly. Respect others' opinions. Respect other people's time. Announcements of closed special meetings. There were a couple. On July 27th, 2017, there was a meeting of the Risk Management Committee. Members were Milton, Susan, Sherry, and Andy. The vote to close was 4-0-0. It was closed under Section 4, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. The meeting was closed at 6:42 p.m. and opened at 7:29. There was a meeting of the Architectural Resource Committee on Monday, August 14th, 2017. The members were Sherry Faneroff, Deb Bach, Eva Marie Lambright, Tom Mungle, and Gracie Bradford. The vote to close was 5-0-0. It was closed under HOA Section 4, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation. The purpose was to discuss new and ongoing covenant cases. The meeting was closed at 1:04 and opened at 2:35 p.m. I'm sorry I forgot to mention at the previous meeting the purpose of the risk management was to discuss general liability matters. I apologize. And there was a closed meeting of the Audit Committee on September 18th, 2017. The members of the committee are Nancy, Greg, Janet, Jim Young, and Ed Berman. The vote to close was 5-0-0. It was closed under Section 1, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and 4, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. The meeting was closed at 8:15 p.m. and opened at 10:02. And the purpose was review of several internal audit reports and consultation on legal matters. So those were the three we had. Okay. Approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So approved.
Jenny moves. Is there a second? Lynn, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Can I ask something though? I was going to make a motion, but is there a plan to talk about this Paris Accord thing?
Next, it's October work session and October board meeting.
Okay.
It's already on the agendas.
All right, thanks.
Disclosure of conflict of interest, none have been disclosed to me. So move on to resident speak out. And once again, thank our residents for staying And Dick is going to be our official timekeeper. He has his he has his official.
Calibrated against the atomic clock. I mean,
Oh, my God.
Okay, first off, we have Paul Versinski representing the Howard County Citizens Association. Welcome, Paul.
Good evening, all. Paul Verchinsky, board member on behalf of the Howard County Citizens Association, and I'm a resident of Oakland Mills since 1973. We are against any funding of the Columbia Housing Center, the CHC, from any CA resources. Originally, this speak out was going to focus on the merits of this $400,000 request, but we had to add an item which is an overarching issue that's tied to this request. This major issue is both the appearance and actual conflict of interest and questionable ethics of an officer of CA. You have before you who actually formed this nonprofit organization in late August, an officer of CA. All of this information is in the public domain. This corporation is domiciled at her house, and she is the person who could potentially financially gain from any funding by CA. Do not know if her role was shared with anyone on the board when this $400,000 request was made in September. Like you, she owes loyalty to CA and upstanding ethics. The CA board has dealt with a lot of board ethics issues in the past, and we would submit that you need to investigate what happened here and take suitable action. On this conflict alone, this request should be denied. Second, we have researched the Oak Park Regional Housing Center. The following is from their website. Quote, Oak Park was once a lily-white suburb, but as the community watched blockbusting over the border in Chicago, the town banded together to buck the trend. In 1968, it passed the Municipal Fair Housing Ordinance, followed by the establishment of the Housing Center. Nowadays, Oak Park is 67.7% white and widely known as a community of choice for people of all races, close quote. So the Oak Park Center was established by legislation which is not the role and authority of the CA but Howard County's. In Oak Park, landlords are required to list their rentals through the center. The CHC would have landlords only volunteer info. Columbia has never been a lily-white suburb. From its inception in 1969, it's been racially diverse. According to a CA report, quote, characteristics of Columbia dated December 2012, 56.6% are white and the remaining racially diverse. My educated guess is that Columbia is now probably 50% white and 50% racially diverse. Columbia has done a much better job than Oak Park without the need for any housing referral center. In the future, Columbia will get about 900 affordable rentals in the downtown and about 300 in Longreach, which will continue its diversity. Columbia has always been known as a diverse community of choice. A 2014 Baltimore Housing Market Survey by the Baltimore Metropolitan Council deemed Columbia one of four suburbs in the region that could be called, quote, truly multiracial, close quote. If in fact there is an issue with diversity related to affordable housing, it is outside of Columbia and in the rest of Howard County. Affordable rentals are the issue in the county, and the county needs to deal with that. Fee in lieu of providing affordable housing has allowed developers to buy their way out instead of providing affordable rental and for sale units. Howard County has never developed and legislated an affordable housing plan for the area outside of Columbia. To summarize, this request should be denied due to 1, a real conflict of interest by an officer of CA, and 2, the need to have the housing rental diversity issue addressed outside of Columbia, namely in the rest of Howard County. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions? Thank you. Oh, Dick?
When you look over the list of officers of the corporation, are there any other individuals who might have a conflict, say lawyers who represent developers or any other persons who...
That are on your staff? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what there are codes of ethics, and whether they go with them or not is another story. I know that if there are issues with ethics, then they can be brought up before the courts in Maryland.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. Next up, we have Ginger Scott, followed by Tom Scott. Welcome, Ginger.
Thank you.
Then welcome back.
Good evening. I'm Ginger Scott, and I've lived at 5070 Whetstone Road in Wild Lake for almost 47 years. First, I want to thank Mr. Matthews for asking Dan Burns to respond to several questions Tom and I asked about the recommendation to sell beer from carts on Fairway Hills Golf Course. We appreciate Mr. Burns' timely response both to these initial questions and to additional ones mainly about the vehicle itself and when it would operate. When Cheryl asked about why I had asked you all if CA's medical director had been consulted about selling more than 4 beers per round, I explained that I thought there were generally accepted standards for safe levels of beer consumption. I could not cite a specific source. Now I can. The U.S. Departments of Agriculture and Health and Human Services state that, quote, moderate drinking is up to 1 drink per day for women and up to 2 for men, unquote. A 12-ounce beer can of 12-ounce can of beer counts as 1 drink. Even CA's clubhouse sales of beer to golfers may exceed these standards. Dick asked if I knew of specific negative experiences residents had had with golfers. I mentioned public urination and foul language. I neglected to mention the impact on residents of grossly misdirected balls. Neighbors have found many balls in their yards. Here is a modest example. Oops. Wildly errant balls have broken windows in houses and windshields in cars parked in driveways. They have slammed into local houses, decks, and screened porches. They have flown into and across local streets. 2 families, one on hole 13 and one on hole 15, complained about golf balls sailing over their heads as they were eating on their decks. CA tried fixes that would encourage hooking rather than slicing. The fixes worked, except for one thing. 2 hooked balls struck residents who were working in their yards on the other side of the course. Incidents like these have not happened because Fairway Hills has been a caring and responsive neighbor. They have happened because CA ignored its consultant's advice not to put a golf course in Running Brook because of the close proximity of existing homes. I hope you will not increase their frequency by recommending easier access to alcohol for golfers.
Thank you, Ginger. Any questions? Alan.
To your knowledge, when golf balls have broken windows, windshields, etc., how has Fairway Hills CA been as a neighbor around remediation?
Well, we were some of the unfortunate victims, and I would say that the person that CA sent out did an excellent job of repairing the damage to our son's bedroom window.
Thank you.
Any? Thank you, Ginger. Oh,
Just a
Ginny?
quick question. The golfer didn't realize he or she broke your window? They didn't know where that ball went?
Well, the day that this happened,
Oh.
they were having a very, very, very over-the-top outing. There were over 300 golfers, and I think that the information that CA provides about outings is that either golf course can accommodate something like 150 golfers, so they were about double their limits. And there were I think only 2 people in the Fairway Hills office that day. All kinds of excuses for why they, couldn't pay attention. I'm sure the golfer, I don't know whether the golfer had any idea. Bob Bellamy used to say, if somebody, hits a ball into your house, the golfer will come to you and tell you they're sorry, and they did it. But in Running Brook, they've got to walk across a creek, and it's never happened. It's never happened. We've
Okay.
had a lot of balls.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ginger.
One last question.
Alan?
Over what period of time was the golf ball collection?
Oh, I was trying to think about that today. I think it's probably been about 8 years that this collection has developed, because what we have been doing with golf balls 2 years in a row there was to wrap aluminum foil around them so that our grandsons could have a meteor hunt, a meteorite hunt at their birthday parties when they were space parties, and we're keeping them now to see whether our 11-year-old twins want to do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ginger.
Okay.
Next up, we have Tom Scott, followed by Russ Worthy. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. This won't take a minute. I'm just here, I'm passing around a petition that I'm circulating in the neighborhood in which I live. It's an ongoing situation. I intend to get more signatures. I just started on this yesterday, and I found that a lot of people aren't home during the daytime, and I'm reluctant to go around at night. But I will get more signatures and give you some more signatures on the petition. The petition basically asks that you do not approve the sale of beer from mobile golf carts tootling around the paths of Fairway Hills Golf Course. That's the only thing I need to say.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions? Alan?
I'm just curious, have you all, my understanding is, this is the first time in my recollection, the last couple of years, I've heard you all come up here and talk about this. I understand this is a long-standing concern.
Oh, yes. The board decided in 1995 to not allow the sale of beer from the carts. And somehow, in 2006, CA started doing it again. So we came back to the board and reminded them of their previous decision. And a new decision was made in 2007 that disallowed it again. All I'm asking you is to continue that policy.
And I guess my question is, have you and your neighbors ever tried, or have we ever offered to try to help sort of facilitate a dialogue between you and the golfing community to,
No?
thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Russ, welcome. Following Russ will be Crystal Lee.
Russ Swatek, 8141 Tamar Drive. Just a little bit about the NT zoning. Your president and 7 of the voting board members were at the CA film a few weeks ago. You all heard of Jim Rouse's goals to respect the land, create a place that grew people. and his last goal was to make a profit. Well, that's what made Columbia the #1 small city to move to. And that's what we need to have again if we're going to continue to be the #1 city. If we don't have that, we're going to degrade and just be American City anywhere. I would ask that you advocate with the county council to create a Columbia Planning Board or an advisory panel with some authority and explicitly tasked to further the Rouse vision and goals. Secondly, I put a confusing picture on all your seats. The picture is really to provide a sense of location and to show that I had the east to west spacing right. If you turn it so the blue line is on the bottom, that represents the Lake Kit water level. The brown shows the elevation gain as you traverse from east to west. The little small spire, green spire on the right, represents a 4-story building, and it's lined up where the teachers' building is, the old CA headquarters, Clyde's on the bottom. If you just move to the next green square on the left, in the middle one, it represents the 9 stories height that is allowed where the American Cities building is, along that line. As you keep going to the left, you cross over Little Patuxent and up the hill, and you find a representation of a 15-story building. These are all to the same scale. Over the middle one, there's a little red box on top of the green square. That's the additional 6 stories that Howard Hughes is asking for. Because they're asking to go from the 9 stories that's currently authorized up to 15 stories. And all you need to do is to take a straight edge and kind of rotate it on the top right corners of these buildings. You'll see the effect they're going to have on the amount of sunlight that falls on your amphitheater. And keep in mind that in line with the amphitheater is that teacher's building, but the amphitheater area doesn't have any buildings. It's just trees there that are going to miss their sun. Questions?
Any questions for us? By the way, also thank you for the back. I mean, yeah.
After the last meeting, I saw that you were concerned about parking spaces. So I was there Sunday for the Columbia Jazz Band. They were better than I've ever heard them before. But I walked around and I counted the spaces in the various parking lots in the area. So that at least you'd have numbers to deal with when you were talking about it. The number of handicap spaces is included in the total number of spaces. And that day, the American City lot was full. The Copeland's lower lot full. The only thing open in those areas were 2 or 3 handicap spaces.
Thank you, Russ. Any questions? Alan?
You referenced the building heights, and I guess the other issue is number of buildings and sight lines. Did you have any comments about that?
Not so much about the sight line to the lake, but where Howard Hughes plans to build is on the American City lot, American City parking lot, which is right above your amphitheater. So it's going to totally block the sun from the amphitheater area and the trees there starting in early afternoon.
Greg?
Russ, you aware we're going to have, I believe CA is paying for it or helping to pay for a, Jane, what's it called, a shade study, a sun study?
We recommended to the county that they require that of the developer, and they have. So we're not paying for it. The developer will, a shadow study. So next time they submit, which will be next month, that will be included so we can see the impact of the building height on shade and shadow.
I thought a picture might be worth 1,000 words.
Yeah, and this isn't from the developer.
Thanks, Russ. Next we have Chris Oliva, followed by Jonathan Edson. Chris, welcome.
Am I on?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Hi, my name's Chris Oliva. I'm from Hickory Ridge, and I'm just here to report to you on a couple of issues that'll kind of supplement your development tracker, which is a very useful report, and I regularly review it. First of all, FDP Amendment 1 to 117, which is the Siling Industrial Park. The hearing examiner reversed the planning board and approved the addition of the liquor store on that lot. I had opposed that, and it was my position that it is not the proper way to amend the final development plan, and that they were rezoning industrial to retail, which is not allowed. And so I filed a motion to reconsider, which was 22 pages, and the hearing examiner just dismissed it. In any case, there was another thing that arose out of this. I discovered there's an error in the rules of procedure of the hearing examiner. The hearing examiner conducts their hearings under rules. And if you're appealing a planning board decision, you have to prove by substantial evidence that, they made an error. So you take all the evidence and you say they made an error here, 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 and here. Well, the planning board doesn't have a record. So it's impossible to apply the substantial evidence standard to a planning board decision. And the hearing examiner mused about this on several occasions. Boy, what should I do? Well, what she should do is she should have actually reported back to the Department of Planning and Zoning that there's an error in the rules of procedure. They should apply the preponderance of the evidence standard because, again, there's no record. And that way the record would be established at the hearing examiner. Additionally, she has taken authority which she does not have. Under the zoning regulation, she can amend conditional use applications and variances. So if you wanted to vary your setback from 15 to 10 feet, she could say, hey, do it 12, okay? But on an appeal of a planning board decision, that authority doesn't exist. So I've written the Department of Planning and Zoning and alerted them to this, and I'll report to you about when they're going to fix it. Then I submitted ZRA 173 to fix the error in the county code for standing. The planning board reported it out and recommended to the county council that they fix the error. And so we're waiting on the county council to see what they do with that. Tonight, FDP 55 amendment is being heard to clarify that in industrial zones, when it says gas station, it means ancillary to the primary industrial use, like the Columbia Association maintenance facility on Gearwig Lane. And this could cause trouble. There's been a lot of problems at Oakland Ridge Industrial Park with uses that are encroaching on Long Reach and Oakland Mills and other neighborhoods up there. And there's been a lot of tree cutting up there. And unfortunately, the developer who has been active in this has come on hard times, and those properties will probably be foreclosed on, and then who knows what will happen. And this is why it's important to have the control, because otherwise, it's a free-for-all. In any case, thirdly and last, I wanted to share a potential solution for Columbia to enforce their covenants and administrate the zoning. The county can pass legislation enabling the establishment of the Columbia Planning Advisory Council. The Columbia Association could nominate 5 members, and the business community could nominate 4. And then the Columbia Association would have a formal role to play. So I thank you very much for your time this evening, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you, Chris. Alan?
I want to clarify something you said. The planning board doesn't keep minutes of their meetings?
Well, actually, they stopped, And then it was brought to their attention that they needed to do that. Under the state law, they are allowed to just substitute the video, which they have. But the problem with that is that if you want to see what they've done over history, how they voted, and just a thumbnail of what they've done, who's going to look through 2 hours of video? And it makes it very inconvenient to make any kind of a evaluation of their actions.
Okay. And second question, on the FDP 55 amendment, is there something you're asking for from us?
No, it's not my amendment. I'm just here. This is kind of a supplemental to your development tracker. These were some issues that I didn't see covered there. The error in the rules of procedure, that's brand new. Nobody really knows about that except me and the director now. So, but again, this is causing, a lot of the problems.
So overall, except I get that you would like us to participate in pushing the county to do the standing thing and in pushing this planning advisory council. Is there anything else that you would like, if you were king of CA, you would have us do?
I think that it would be in the interest of your members and the public interest if CA had a formal role to play that was formalized and codified with the county, and that we had control over this. And not only that, it's important for the other property owners because right now they're over there, it's at their whim, and it's supposed they say, no, where do you appeal? And then you appeal, and then the rules are broken. And, this is a real problem in my opinion. And so I've long urged the Columbia Association, and I've long had the position that they should have a formal role, and that would be appropriate.
Thank you.
Dick?
This hearing examiner, is there any way to appeal the hearing examiner's calls? You say there are a lot of errors that she made. Where do you take it from there?
The appeal of the Wegmans was actually mounted by Wegmans. The original case, the two parties were Wegmans was advocating for the amendment, and then the Maryland Licensed Beverage Association, along with Giant Foods, had opposed this because they were, concerned that they did not have any reliance on the zoning. And Giant Food can't start selling liquor tomorrow, or even rent out liquor or do anything because of the long established rules. And so then the planning board actually ruled against Wegmans and agreed that it was the improper way to amend an FDP, and it was not consistent with the industrial, and Wegmans then appealed it. And then the planning board, the hearing examiner reversed the planning board. And as I said, she's doing it, in my opinion, in a way that violates the regulations. The zoning regulations are reflected in the rules of procedure.
But there's no way you can appeal.
Well, now, right now, the people who advanced the appeal probably would not have standing because most of them are not property owners.
Jenny?
Yeah. So right now, it was reversed. Now, where does it go at this point? Does it go to the county council? Go to the liquor board?
It's going to go nowhere because any of the parties that, when Wegmans appealed it, they were the appellant, okay? And then the other parties, the Maryland Licensed Beverage Association and Giant, they're just considered interested parties.
Right.
Now the shoe's on the other foot, and they would have to appeal it, and there's several lawyers in the room here now, but now they would have to have standing. Well, none of these companies and none of these entities have standing under the Howard County regulations, and that gets back to my standing ZRA.
Let me clarify my question then.
I'm sorry.
What I am asking is, what is the legal process? Because I haven't looked at this in a long time.
Oh,
The
it would be
hearing
to appeal
examiner-
to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. So this decision, which now is in Wegmans, to simplify it, favor, will now go to the Board of Appeals.
No, it will not, because nobody has standing.
What?
No, because, it won't, it's done, because Wegmans they
So does
won. and they-
Wegmans, let's clarify this again. Does Wegmans now have a right to have a liquor store on that property?
They do not have a right yet because they have to get a liquor license.
Yeah, but that's legally, from a zoning point of view, they have a right.
Yes, they do.
They've changed the land to allow for this.
Yes.
use. Okay, so now it's just a matter of we go into what the liquor laws say.
Right.
Okay, I
That's
just
correct.
want to make it pretty clear where we are in the whole
absolutely.
thing. Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Jonathan? And then after Jonathan, Dan Woodward. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi. See you again.
I have my voice this time, so.
You sounded good
Sort of.
Tuesday.
Sort of.
Uh,
I think you're starting to
Good
lose
evening,
it.
everyone. I'm Jonathan Edelson, chairman of the Oakland Mills Community Association. I'm going to go off my remarks for a second because I want to offer a few thank yous. A big thank you to Ginny Thomas and to Milton Matthews. I don't know if everyone knows, but we had a little situation at the other barn Thursday where our one and only elevator broke beyond repair, and as you know, our main rental is upstairs in the loft, and Ginny and Milton intervened and had a crew working through the weekend to get a new elevator installed, and Senator Guzon's office, our village manager, Sandy Cedarbaum, contacted him. They've expedited a state inspector to come out at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, so, fingers crossed that everything passes. We won't have a bunch of weddings ruined over the next couple of weekends, because we were in a situation where we had, about 4 weddings where we had guests who actually, can't walk stairs, so we were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place when they came out and said, your elevator can't be repaired anymore, so thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. Milton and I thank you, but is Janet still here? All right, just to get on the record, Janet was a big help in this as well.
Thank you.
She went over and actually fixed it.
She was going to carry people up the stairs. So my other reason, my planned reason for coming here tonight was to talk to you about the proposed changes to the assessment share formula. The Oakland Mills Board sent comments back to the assessment share committee, and I understand these comments have also been shared with you, but I must underscore the dire financial circumstances Oakland Mills would face should we lose nearly $57,000 in assessment share. This represents almost a 10% cut to our total budget and a 15% cut to the current assessment share we receive. It's by far the largest cut among all of Columbia's villages under the proposal. First and foremost, the cuts to our budget required to absorb this loss, even if implemented over a 3 fiscal year period, would leave us unable to fulfill our mission to serve the residents of Oakland Mills. We must remember that we are incorporated to operate exclusively for the promotion of the health, safety, common good, and social welfare of the owners of property in and residents of the community of Columbia. That comes from our Articles of Incorporation. As you may know, Oakland Mills has the lowest median income of any Columbia village and is the home of one fully subsidized apartment complex and one partially subsidized apartment complex owned by the Howard County Housing Commission. We are also home to the high school, middle school, and elementary school with the highest rates of children receiving free and reduced meal services in all of Howard County. A cut of this magnitude will affect everyone in Oakland Mills, but it could most acutely affect those in most need in our community. For example, our schools, PTAs, boosters, and other local community nonprofits rely on our modest donation budget to fund important programs and activities. With our recent support, every child at Stevens Forest Elementary, where 2/3 of the children receive food assistance, brings a book home from their book fair. The new pre-K at Talbot Springs Elementary, where half the students receive food assistance, got iPads for use in their classrooms. The PTSA at Oakland Mills Middle brought in an author to work with students on writing. The brand new Oakland Mills High Robotics Club entered and won their first competition. The Oakland Mills Fine Arts Boosters bought instruments for children who could not otherwise afford them. And the Forest Ridge Community Center kept its doors open to our neediest children when its county funding was cut. These organizations do not have the fundraising base that similar organizations in other parts of the county have, and our modest donation can mean the difference between serving a need or letting the inequality continue to grow. We watch expenses very carefully for our special events to ensure that they can be offered at no additional cost to our residents so that everyone can attend. These include not only social events, but important informational events like housing rehabilitation panels, Board of Education candidate forums, health and safety sessions with local authorities. The staff and hours of operation cuts we may have to make would lead to both a reduction in the number of special events we can host and the need to charge admission fees to events that were once free to our residents. We will also very likely need to stop advertising and use of printed newsletters. Without advertising, we could face additional revenue loss as through reduced rentals of the other barn, as almost all of our rental business comes through advertising. Additionally, many of our residents still rely on printed media for information due to both preference and, more importantly, lack of access to social and electronic media, and they would miss out on important events and other information. Our thoughts on the assessment formula itself are covered in our first response to the proposal, but they are worth repeating again. The formula developed by the Assessment Share Group, which I know put in a lot of time and effort, makes everything equal based upon arithmetic formulas, but it is not equitable. For example, our main rental facility, the other barn, is a unique and iconic structure in Columbia. Unfortunately, it is also a difficult structure to manage and maintain. While the formula includes a flat rate per square foot of space across all facilities in all villages, it fails to consider the unique features and limitations of facilities. When the loft in the other barn is in use, we cannot rent the rooms on the bottom floor. If we did, we would have people walking through each other's events to access the ADA entrance and use the restroom facilities, which we only have downstairs. So our reality is that we have limited opportunity to bring in revenue from all of the square footage available for rental at the other barn. The formula does not recognize this. As an older facility with unique architecture, the other barn also represents expense challenges. While we recognize and appreciate that CA covers capital expenditures over $1,000, many individual maintenance expenses in our facilities fall below this level on a per-case basis, but they add up quickly over the course of the year. We pay for numerous service calls in our dumbwaiter because our main rental space is upstairs, but our kitchen is downstairs. The aforementioned elevator has broken many times before the last incident that led to its replacement. It takes 2 CA workers to change a light bulb in the loft at a cost of $150 per incident.
Well, that answers that question.
Yes. These are just a few examples to illustrate why a one-size-fits-all formula does not work when the villages it is being applied to are not starting out on equal footing. Similarly, our housing stock is older than most of the rest of Columbia. Other villages have benefited from lessons learned in pioneer villages like Oakland Mills and Wild Lake. Oakland Mills is about to celebrate a milestone, its 50th birthday, but that is also a reminder that our homes, apartment buildings, and commercial properties were built using practices and materials not used in newer villages. We would like to do property standards evaluation, but such a cut would make this impossible. We already have a backlog of covenant cases, and reducing our covenant advisors' hours would only make this worse. In conclusion, I hope the CA Board will consider that equal and equitable have different meanings. Equal means the same, while equitable means fair. The assessment share formula proposed is equal. Unfortunately, the villages it may be applied to are not equal, and that will lead to an outcome that is not equitable. We all signed fiduciary responsibility agreements. I signed for OMCA, you signed for CA, but because of the way our finances are intertwined, I implore you to consider your fiduciary responsibility to Columbia's villages. Oakland Mills understands and accepts that things will change under any new assessment share formula. However, unless this formula is adjusted to account for differences in our villages and our assessment share decrease is capped, our mission and financial stability are in serious jeopardy.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Dick.
Alan.
So I should know this, and I could go back to your previous testimony, but shorthand, what are you recommending?
So if nothing else, if nothing else, we would like to see the outliers in the assessment share formula capped. We understand that we probably should be somewhere in the middle of the pack when it comes to assessment share, but what it would take to get us there is it's a very large hit. I mean, it's 10% of our entire budget, 15% of the assessment share we're receiving now. And it would be very difficult to manage that even with a phase-in. Now, one idea I was actually just discussing in the back of the room was, if there are opportunities to increase revenue, or if we are able to find opportunities to increase revenue, maybe even a cap could be revisited. So, you cap the loss of the assessment share, and then if we find we're able to do some new and unique things to increase revenue, you start reducing that cap. But right now we are kind of limited. The other barn and the neighborhood centers, they're rented out. I mean, they're pretty much rented out at 100%. So there's not really a lot more square footage we could rent. Someday we would love to see the other barn maybe renovated and made into a more useful facility where we can take advantage of more of that space. But given what we have now, that's what we have. So we're not seeing great opportunities to increase revenue.
So as you have, I assume you've discussed this as village managers and have gotten together. What kind of reception have you gotten? What's the discussion been like as you discuss this with the assembled village managers?
I'm the chair of the board. I haven't. I don't know if Sandy can comment on whether the village managers have gotten together.
Discussed it, but individually, I think you all in your packet have what every village has sent back. There are certain things that you'll hear from the committee that the villages all come to almost a full agreement on. But right now, John was talking on behalf of both mills. There are things that the village managers have discussed that we agree on, and that each village's comments are in your packet.
I guess that doesn't quite answer. I'm wondering what the assembled, and maybe if you're not the right person to answer, maybe at some point we could hear from you, what the assembled village managers, when you get together and you talk about these unique challenges, are they receptive to that, or do they say, no, we think this formula was great? What's the...
Individually, the villages have come up with recommendations. Some of them are very similar as far as cap fund, cash reserve, and contingency fund, and things like that. But we all face challenges in our village. Every single village, whether you're getting money or losing those big challenges, a dramatic decrease in our funding will cause Oakland Mills to face severe financial challenges.
Thank you.
Okay. Dick, Nancy?
Are there any specific factors in the formula that cause this big change? I mean,
Well, it's the fact that the formula basically applies multipliers to facilities and to properties and to residency that are constant across all villages, but it's kind of like I said, but the villages aren't starting off in an equal place,
Well,
so that leads to these inequitable outcomes.
in the previous formula, it seemed to work to your advantage, and this works to your disadvantage. I'm just wondering if there were any particular factors that caused that shift.
Previous formulas, I think, were not equally weighted on facilities. I mean, Andy was very talking about the board members on that. They were looking, it wasn't everything's equal facility-wise. So some of the larger older facilities, I think, had a larger proportion of the assessment share because of maintenance costs and maintaining older buildings and multiple facilities. I think that was one different factor.
Nancy?
Do you have any idea what the total amount is that you donate to help the children in the lower income situations?
Our donation budget is it a total of 5,000 this fiscal year? 4,500. Right. So it comes out to somewhere between $4,500 and $5,000 a year, spread out among different organizations. And then we'll do other things as well. Like this doesn't come out of the donation budget, but to honor our volunteers, we'll make another donation to a nonprofit on their behalf that actually comes out of an events fund. So, I think when it's all said and done, between that and also between offering space for meetings, et cetera, it comes to greater than $5,000 a year on average.
Thanks, John.
Can you get us closer, greater than 5,000, like 5,500, or greater than 5,000, like 15,000, 20,000?
Oh, no. Like, yeah, 5,000, 51, 5,200, something like that, yeah.
I think if it's okay with the board, I think we can get back to you on exactly how much rather than guess. Is that all right?
It's in the financials.
On everything.
We have.
Yeah, I mean, our financials do show a donation line item. I think it's currently at $4,500, but we also make other donations out of other line items, just due to the way we budget and structure our events.
Yeah, but what I'm really asking, do you also have things, for example, that because of the socioeconomic status of your average resident, do you do things like not charge for things that another village might charge for, or provide, so things that wouldn't come directly as an expense, but would represent lowered income, for example?
I mean, I can't compare to what other villages do because I'm not familiar with all of them. But yeah, for example, we've made our pool party free, to make sure our residents of lower income means don't have to pony up to bring their whole family, and pay for the pool party. We've done other things. I talked about the community center at Forest Ridge, which is the fully subsidized complex. So in addition to giving to them, we have also allowed them to hold fundraisers in the other barn and waive the rental fees, so that they can just have the full benefit of the fundraiser without having to incur any expense. So obviously that's a for-profit rental opportunity that we're forgoing in favor of them coming and using the other barn.
Well, that's the larger view on both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Next we have Dan. Dan, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Dan Woodruff. I'm the board chair from Dorsey Search Village. I just want to make a few short comments, 3 points on the proposed assessment share work group that you have on your agenda on 11C, I believe. It says, first, the Dorsey Search Village Board agrees in theory with the current version of the formula that is being proposed. It's logical, quantifiable, repeatable, and probably fair with the focus on resident population. Second, the contingency fund. We believe that if the contingency fund is closed, that the fund's redistribution should go only to the 10 villages. In our opinion, CA has not provided any reasonable argument as to why they should get a share of the redistribution of the funds when they never participated in the fund. The third point is the cash reserve cap. In the interest of making the villages more accountable and to provide us better long-term planning opportunities, our preference would be to eliminate the cap completely. If that is unacceptable, then increasing the current cap from the 15% to 30% or more is highly encouraged. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I thought you had 4.
3.
3, sorry. Okay. Thanks, Dan.
I did admit 3.
Do we get a
Yes, sir.
discount?
Great.
The recommendation that we give all the money in the contingency fund back to the villages, is that the
Yes.
board's? I mean, did the board consider the cost that CA is going to have to pay this year, next year, and coming years just to maintain our facilities and what we're trying to do with
that's why
it?
they have a $60 million budget. That fund was never set up for CA to participate. CA has not put any money into that fund, and it should go back to the villages.
Well, it came from CA, right?
No, it did not. It came from the villages.
Through CA, right?
Well, just because CA is the banker doesn't mean the banker should get our money.
Your money.
Any other questions for Dan? Dick.
I'll take it personal. My money. Yes, the village's money. Yes, Dick.
Greg, the funds.
No. Don't get in an argument with Greg.
No,
Do you have questions for
I'm
Dan?
going to clarify.
Dan?
I'm going to clarify something. The money was generated by the overages in the village budgets, and CA never contributed anything to that. CA collects the money for the villages and then disperses it. So it's really CA never participated in funding.
Dick, do you have a question? Because we'll have a chance to discuss internally all
It's
you know,
11C,
especially
I think.
the contingency fund. Jenny.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
In terms of your facility, which is beautiful, I've been there for a couple of events, and but your square footage, you can pretty much use the whole thing when you're renting. At least I've been there for weddings and other things, right? You're
yeah.
all one level, so you don't have the problem like you have 2 levels like Oakland Mills does, and you can't rent the other parts. You can use all your square footage for rent.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
No, that.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan. That's all I have on the list. Anyone else wish? If not, thank you very much. Appreciate everyone coming. We'll move on. Could you put that down? Thank you. Okay, chair's remarks. They're written as has been requested.
Very much.
I will just say I actually was not able to get to the bike bout. I understand it was very good. I was not doing well that day and couldn't do a 10-mile ride. And I did get to the covenant briefing, and I thought it was really good. And I believe every village was represented. So that I think went really well, and it was very good to see the turnout. So I want to definitely thank Sherry and our staff for putting on that activity.
Just one correction there. There's a flyer at your place. The Gale Holiday poster tree is at 5 p.m. as opposed to 4 p.m. And there's the other events that are happening on Sunday afternoon on the lakefront.
That's what happens when you prepare this report. Yeah, 10 days in advance.
Oh, okay, thank you.
5 p.m. You would have been late for it.
That's
no, you would not have been late for it.
Okay. Move on now to reports, president's reports. Any questions for Milton? Alan.
Either I happen to be absent from the board at strategic times or missed the discussion or it never happened. This Columbia Housing Center, I'm not clear why it's not just an office here. I'm a huge proponent of affordable housing. I'm a huge proponent of taking steps to increase diversity. I'm a huge proponent of CA being an advocate for the Columbia value of increased diversity of all kinds. That said, I'm not clear why this kind of thing isn't an office here in this building as versus some separate nonprofit.
Well, number one, I think the first point that needs to be clarified, and Jane can do it better. The housing center, their premise, as my understanding, is not about affordable housing. It was never intended to be about.
Take that off the list.
Okay, we'll take that off the table. The other thing is that this discussion started after we had Rob Brademeyer come. And when Jane approached me about in the group that wanted to have this conversation, I told her, please, I would encourage her to be a part of it. But my initial recommendation is not a service that I believe CA should be housed at CA. And so the whole time it was having a discussion whether they were exploring this and where it should end up. I guess the decision made that it would be a standalone organization because that's where I guess their conversations ended up. They would go forward looking at it as being a standalone organization as opposed to being a part of an existing organization. It's already, as well as in the process of being incorporated as a 501c3 organization. We're a 501c4 organization.
I understand it. So I'll just presage my comments then, which is either it's separate or it's not. And if it's separate, that's fine. And I could support it as an individual. But I don't see CA providing its bulk of its budget if it's a separate organization.
Well, I mean, we'll definitely talk about that during the budget. Anything else?
I'm not an officer of the Columbia Association.
Of the what?
Right. She's not an officer
Of what?
of Columbia Association.
CA.
We'll talk about that later.
My only question is, if we're going to be in any way considering this, can we get a business plan? I don't even know who to ask. What?
So
I mean, if if it's going to be a new organization, there should be a business plan, I hope, when they're asking for $400,000, just for the heck of it.
Okay, so remember, every request that came into CA regarding the budget is going to be put together in a book. I mean, regardless of whether we're going to fund it or not, but all the requests that are made will go in a book, and we will actually take that up
Okay.
October 12th. I think we're going to see the book.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
And just to be clear, because I've only been through that part of the cycle once, and having felt like we're burned in the last cycle, every recommendation, every request gets in the book.
Right.
Does the staff weight them with their recommendation or not?
Well, so every request will get in the book, and there will be a response to that with some information. And
Some information or with a recommendation?
I think probably with the recommendations, because they're going to have to come up with a bottom line.
Right.
Here's what we think can go forward. And then the board has to sit here. We can weigh the staff recommendation, and we know what we said as the bottom lines. And then we will make the final decision as to kind of what gets in and what doesn't.
Well, then, since I won't be here during the work session, you can, neither will Dick, because
But
we'll be in Lyon or wherever it is, we'll be on the 12th. And count that as part of my comments. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did want to point out that Chuck Thompson, our Chief Information Officer, actually achieved an ITIL Foundation certification. So I want to congratulate Chuck. Okay, move on. Report from Inner Arbor representatives is submitted in writing. Any questions? All right, thank you. Thank you, Lynn, for a minute. Move on to financial reports.
I have a question on that.
Okay.
I was over there the other day and noticed purple ribbons around a lot of trees and stretching through the woods. Was that something to do with the Halloween thing, or is it?
No idea.
It does not have to do with trees being removed.
Right.
That's what you're implying.
I had no idea what it was.
So we'll let them. I mean, let them go back and find an actual answer.
We will, but it has nothing to do with trees
Right.
being removed.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's good to
you
know.
know.
Yes. Question number
All right.
2, what is it?
Okay, financial reports. So the audit committee did review the financial reports, and I will ask Susan or Nancy if they want.
Susan is
I
good.
guess.
She can handle it.
So the first quarter financial report and the first quarter financial statements were presented and reviewed by the audit committee. All the questions that were asked at the meeting were addressed at the meeting as far as the statements go. The first quarter results were positive. Anyone have any questions about the report?
And we'll say the audit committee did recommend
That they come to
that they
the
come,
board.
that they come to the board. So they accepted those. All right. On the board action, consent agenda, hearing no objection. Approve the minutes. Okay, board vote. So the audit committee has reviewed and sent a recommendation to the board of directors for some changes to the Office of Internal Audit Charter. Nancy, as chair of the audit committee, anything you want to add?
Well, no, I mean, they're doing a wonderful job, and if anybody has questions, Susan is the one to ask.
So does anyone have any questions
I
regarding
was.
the recommendation? All right.
Actually, I was just going
Yeah.
to provide a
Sure.
bit of information
Yep.
for the board on the charter, and that was that Jackie thought that this would help her do her job better because it would be more clearly defined. And so that a lot of these changes were things that were, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, but that were specifying role, providing additional role clarification.
No.
And also, I would add that they're tied to best practice. Jackie belongs to a professional association called the Institute of Internal Auditors, and it's according to their best practices is what it's the reason why she went to the audit committee to ask that the charter be revised.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, make a
In
recommendation.
a revision of the charter on
It's right
the,
It's all
on the,
redlined.
no, I'm not seeing it on the agenda. I see a financial report and the financial statements.
Board votes.
11B1.
11B1.
But we have to do approval of the minutes first.
I just did.
It's consent.
I do. It was consent.
The consent agenda.
I did. Sorry. Yeah, we're on 11B board votes for changes to the internal audit charter. Nancy.
The board, okay, yes. The audit committee suggested that we send it to the board, that they approve these changes to the charter.
So you're recommending,
So I'm recommending that we make these changes as suggested.
and Janet is seconding.
I move that we make.
Any discussion? All those in favor of changes? Unanimous. Thank you. All right. Now we'll get to a discussion that's probably going to go real fast and just. Yeah. Okay. So we're on to one of our big topics tonight, and we have the the working group actually here. So first, Milton, is there anything you want to say?
No, please
Okay.
proceed.
Okay, so before we start, I want to extend my thanks to the working group. I know you put in a lot of time and effort, and I thank you that you did send us recommendations. And thank you for all your work you've done. Okay, Jane, is presentation.
Good evening. So we have a short presentation, not as last time we gave you the full report in June, but we've made some changes. So we want to focus on those changes. And our presentation is just about 15 minutes. So please, if you'd like to interrupt us, fine, but the discussion, of course, is yours. And so we'll get out of your way after we've kind of given you an update. The report is pretty comprehensive. It also very clearly says what's the changes from last time. Plus the appendices, I think you will find also helpful as you look at donations or whatever. You can look at that by village across the financials. Those are the audited financials from each village. And some of the backup information that we used. So I urge you, today, in preparation for your next meeting on this topic, that you get into those details some. Okay, without further ado, I would like to introduce Craig Barton, and he is going to begin the presentation, and I'll do the last few slides.
Thank you. I would recommend maybe turning to page 9 if you haven't done so already, the actual formula. I'm going to, before we start to get into the changes that we're recommending for the formula, I'm going to briefly review how we got to this place, and then we'll go into the actual changes.
Is the switch on the side?
It says it's on. Would you just use this one instead?
To begin with, as Andy noted, the work team is comprised of 5 members, 3 of whom are on CA staff and 2 of whom are village managers, as you can see there. We began our work in November of 2016, and we met approximately 20 times. In June, we came before you and presented our first recommendation, our first draft recommendations. We also presented those to the village managers, and we also met separately with the village board chairs. In addition, we actually met with, I think, 2 village boards as well. And then through June and August, we received the input back from the various villages associations, and we took that in under advisement, and then we used that to make our final recommendation. And you see our comments in that packet that we have provided to all of the suggestions that were made to us from the villages as well. As you recall, our goal in creating this formula was to make it easier to understand. We wanted to make sure that it does not discourage village associations from revenue growth. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that it reflects the size and mission of each of the village associations. Oop, did I go the wrong way?
One more.
Oop. All right. I'm having to do this with my left hand. The proposed formula philosophy was to simplify by separating the formula into 2 different parts. The first part we called a mission association share, and the second part we called a facility share or credit. Within those 2 parts, we wanted to make sure that we had identified quantifiable factors that reflect the size and scope of each village and the association's work. With regard to the first part, the mission association share, there are 4 components to that share. Those components were designed to include the cost to the operating side, the operating side of the mission side of the association, which we saw as separate and apart from the facility side. So we wanted to make sure that those two those two aspects of a village life is separated with regard to creating the formula. The mission elements include things like community cohesion, covenant enforcement, and elections, to name a few.
Craig, excuse me.
Yeah.
It just struck me, it didn't strike me before. Events are held in places.
Yep.
I.e. facilities.
Mhm.
So I'm not clear how
This is like a
separation
management.
feels a little bit not so separate.
So that's true, but not in all cases. I mean, we hold some of our events outside, so I mean, it doesn't always have to be within inside a facility. But you are correct that it is within inside of a facility. However, the main aspect of the facility credit has to do with the management of the facility. The main expenses that occur within a facility are the rental costs. Those are the things that really are the drivers of expenses. Events are
You lost me there. I thought rental was an income.
so right, but if you recall in this whole formula, we don't deal with income at all. Our drivers, our quantifiable drivers, are on the expense sides. So one of the reasons that we don't deal with income is our philosophy was we don't want to in any way limit a village's potential for income.
Okay.
Can I suggest we'll get to the facility cost part in a moment, and then if you still have the question.
Yeah. So the first component that we came up with was what we call a base amount. It had fixed. We saw this as fixed expenses that every village incurs, kind of regardless of their size. And so, if you recall, that means that every village was going to receive the exact same amount of money with regard to the base amount. Since we came before you in June, we are only making one slight change to this. And that is with regard to the calculation of those expenses. One of the recommendations that we received kind of across the board was to increase the expenses with regard to base amount and actually all of the expenses that were being used in the calculation of the formula for the inflationary factor. Because if you recall, when we came before you in June, we only had FY16 numbers in front of us. And so we used FY16 numbers to create the formula. However, since then, we've also have received all of the FY17 numbers. After we looked at it and we looked at the recommendation of just making an arbitrary 3% increase, we decided instead that what we would do is we would look at the last 3 years, FY15 through 17, and then use an average of those 3 years to create that number. And so that is the only change that we're recommending with regard to the base amount. It made a modest increase. If you wanted to see the differences, you could go to Appendix A1 right now, and we have all of the years broken out for you there with all of the expenses. And you can see that there is a slight increase between what we originally proposed in FY16. The base amount was going to be $38,552, and now when we do a 3-year average, it only brings it up to $38,679. Okay. With regard to the second component, the village manager credit, we're not proposing any changes to that. The main suggestion that we received was that this credit is based on the 2016 salary study that we did, and within that salary study there was a 50th percentile that was being used to create this number. One of the recommendations that we got across the board was that we again raise this number by 3%. A slight embarrassment on our part that we kind of forgot that we actually had already done that. This was one of the things that from the very beginning when we started to create the formula, we actually did increase that number by 3%. The difference is that this number is not being driven by the actual expenses. This number is being driven by a salary study. So that's why we feel a little more comfortable with actually placing a 3% increase on it.
But-
Anyway, if you want to see how that, oh, yes.
Quick question. But it's up to that's the amount you have here, but it's up to the village to decide whether they want to pay less or.
Absolutely, and that's why we say it's not being driven by an actual expense.
Right,
We have
right.
no
Okay,
idea
just-
what an actual village is paying their managers. But what we know is we offer, based off of a salary study for 2016, those are the recommended salary numbers. And you can look at Appendix B, no, is that right? Yes, Appendix B, to see that where those numbers are coming from, and the fact that we did increase them by 3% already. So that was actually already part of our original recommendation.
Is there any village that currently operates with more than just a single village manager, or has an assistant, or,
No,
or a manager
not that
for
I'm
something
aware of.
else?
I do not. Does anybody know? I don't believe so. The next component is the covenant credit. Again, just to be clear, we're not proposing any changes to the way in which the formula is, the formula itself. We're only proposing changes to the data that is populating the formula. And in this case, we're recommending two changes, similar to I back that up. We're only recommending one change. Again, we were asked to make a 3% increase to the covenant advisor's salary package. We had also made that increase already, so there was no need to do it again. In terms of the change that we're recommending is that we were able to go back and ask the finance department to look again at all of the annual charge paying properties within every village and to really refine that and to make sure that we had the correct numbers. And so they did that for us, and we do believe we have the correct numbers now. And so those are the new numbers that are being used in terms of that first line. It says number of village properties. So there is a slight change to those numbers. Overall, it's not a big change if you compare it to the 2016 numbers. 2016 was 26,496. The new number is 26,672. It did, however, make some alterations within individual villages, though, that it's accounted for in the formula. The next change in the population credit, if you recall, this was to take into account the communications and the events that villages put on, and to correlate that with the size, the actual population size of the village. This, we have two changes that we're recommending. The first one is the actual population numbers. Estimates, excuse me. That's right. Actual population estimates. Originally, we had used a methodology that CA used when they created the 2012 report, and then we updated that number before our last report to have 2017 estimates. Since that time, we decided that it might be better to use Howard County's methodology, and so we have done that, and we show that number now, and that did have a rather large increase. Our original total number for the population, the CA population, was 80,215. When we apply the methodology from the county, that brings the number up to 90,713. Now, in terms of the impact on the formula, yes.
If there are changes in the population over the next 3 years, say, will that be factored into the formula?
It will, but she's going to address that at the end. That's part of other recommendations.
Okay.
So, okay. So that new population gets factored in, and that changes the multiplier a little bit within the population credit. The other big change is that, again, we're using the 3-year average for the expenses. And again, you can see that in the appendix. Finally, the facility credit, and this includes the funding of some of the costs associated with managing the community buildings. Again, this was meant to, we looked at three areas of expenses: the janitorial, the utilities, and the repairs and maintenance. The changes that we're recommending here is that we had forgotten an addition that took place at Dorsey Search, which I believe was about 800 square feet, something of that nature, 880 square feet. So that had a slight change to the overall amount of square feet for all of the villages, and then has a slight change in the multiplier. And again, as we've done with all the other expenses, we decided to use a 3-year average rather than just the FY16 expenses. And again, you can see that in the appendix that you have. Now, I believe Jane's going to come up and talk about some of our other recommendations.
Thank you very much. So related to other recommendations that we just carried forward from June, the phase-in, we're still recommending a 3-year phase-in. So if you change the value of the association share is changing, and it would be phased in over a 3-year period. The benefits that the Columbia Association pays, the employer portion of medical and other insurance benefits that CA pays on top of the allocation will still be paid, so that's not a change. And this past year is $128,000 that CA paid outside of this allotment. The property standard evaluation, this is that curbside review of all the properties in a village that sometimes village have taken up. The recommendation from the committee stands that this would be done as a village prerogative, given the disbursement, however it's dispersed, of the contingency fund, as well as excess cash cap, however that is changed, that there would be more cash on hand, and the village could decide to do that on their own or not. Yes?
Maybe that's your answer, but could you speak to, my understanding is villages, when Harper's Choice did the property standard evaluation, we didn't pull money out of the contingency fund to do it.
Right.
So what's the reasoning to?
The recommendation, I'll get to that in a minute, on the contingency fund is that the contingency fund be dispersed back. What is at odds is how to disperse that. But I think there's no question that there's a decision, either 50-50 CA and the other 50% split 10 ways or 11 ways or however it is. I think, so that's a pot of money. And then there's some discussion about the cash cap reserve and the cap on cash reserves. And in any recommendation, whether it was the committee's original to double that from 15 to 30, or some of the village's recommendations to you that would be done away with, there will be a substantial amount of cash. And that is not something that's done every year, as you know, the PSE. So that was something that somebody could put money aside for and plan for ahead. So we thought with that amount of cash that should be something that the village should be able to do on its own if it wants to. Not every village wants to do it. And so that's what our recommendation is, but that's up to you. I want to present a little bit of information about the split in the contingency fund and how that might look on paper with some recommendations we're making. And that's in your report. Yes?
Yeah, before we get off the property standard evaluation, none of us, I don't think, know how the contingency fund debate is going to end, but let's just say in the past, CA has actually paid for the property tax evaluation. Is that
property standard? Yes.
Property study?
Standard.
Yeah.
Property standard.
CA has paid for it. So if a village hasn't done it yet, we're saying now they should pay for it.
Yeah. So
is there a possibility, and you can, this is something to just think about, if it turns out that the 400,000, 200 stays with CA, and the other 200 gets divided with the 10 villages. Is it possible that part of the CA 200,000 could be allocated to do the property evaluation up to a certain amount, maybe 25,000 per village for villages that haven't done it yet?
So that's up to you all. That's not the recommendation of the committee.
Yeah, okay.
And so we can talk about that a little bit more and why what we came up with.
Okay.
The committee, and when I get to that,
What's just off the top of my head?
on the committee, let me just do one more point and then I'll talk about those items. We had recommended that this be done again in up to 5 years from now. That's what the previous assessment chair discussion was, relook at this in 5 years. We have also suggested that the formula's variables could be looked at every 2 years. So population change, square footage, if there was a change, and those kinds of variables could be looked at 2 years, could be 3 years. That's up to you.
Why not one?
Well, because this is a place for a budget for a 2-year cycle, so we kind of said there's the only one that's really changing in a big way is town center. So that's kind of what we were. So on the contingency fund, the little R means that, and the top means this is a repeat from last time, that we still recommend that should be eliminated because it has rarely been used and the funds continue to accumulate. It was $417,000 at the end of FY16. We have not collected the Essex cash reserves from the villages who have it for 17, but if we did, it would be up to $550,000. So we just recommend that it shouldn't go forward. Okay, so the group worked extremely well together, and I really thank all of my colleagues for their really hard work. 20 times, several hours, that's a lot of time to spend together, and they did a really great job. But given our different perspectives, we couldn't come to agreement on these issues, although we had total agreement on the formula. So the villages, the 2 village managers, as they represented their villages, all the villages in their comments, they said disperse the funds in the contingency on either 10 ways to all the villages exclusively or 11 ways. That the CA would just get an 11th share, not a 50% share. CA management wants the fund dissolved and split 50-50, and it wants to double the excess cash reserve from 15 to 30%. And the villages want it eliminated entirely. So the team couldn't reach a consensus on these for the period we're discussing, FY19 and beyond. So I'm sorry to throw that back at you, but that's where it is. But in the interim, we did come up with something near term and an alternative approach that would work on these issues in the next during the current budget year to help with the transition from one formula to the other. And these are one, to distribute the 50% to each, but also for each village that's receiving a smaller allocation in the new formula versus the existing formula for 18. So we calculated our formula for this current year, even though it's not in effect. For the 4 villages that would be losing money, they would be allowed to keep their excess cash reserves over 15% from last year. So as I said, CA has not billed for that yet. So for instance, Oakland Mills gave over $20,000 back, it would have, if we had just collected it. So they would get to keep that, plus a 50% share, which is some $20,000. So they would get $46,000. I'm using that as an example. And that's in your report, I think on page 9, how this would work out. And those funds would be protected forever, meaning the next year, if there were cash caps, we wouldn't just be able to skim it off the top. So that's the rainy day fund that would not be subject to any cap. So that could be used for anything that the villages think that they would need. Yes.
Great. And does each of those, you said there are 4 villages that fall into this category?
That's correct, yep. Page 7, sorry, thank you.
And so does each of those 4 villages, fall, each of those four villages similar to that example you just gave for Oakland Mills, where they're going to get money back.
Right. So Oakland Mills, if we had billed them the way we usually do, we're in this process, so we didn't do it yet. Oakland Mills would return $21,000 to the contingency fund because they didn't spend it over and above the 15%. Owen Brown had $4,000, Harper's Choice had $17,000, and Wildlife $18,000. So on page 7, if you see, and you add that to the 50% split without those funds, then some villages are getting as high as $46,000, some as $24,000. That's our recommendation. Then
Sure.
one more before.
Andy, point of order. On our agenda, it says board discussion. Should we be treating this as a work session, or are we going to vote on this?
Well, no, we're not voting on
Thank
it.
you.
It's a
Yeah.
discussion.
So I think this is our
The
one
voting
of our
is, by the
last
way-
slides.
Right, the voting is going to occur at the October board meeting. It's already on the agenda.
So this again is an alternative approach
Sure.
that the committee came up with. Can I just finish these last two because it goes along. So you had the 50 and 50, but it had to be plus those villages could keep the excess for the 4 villages that are having a lesser allocation. Then for the current year, no cash, excess cash for remittances over 15% would be required. This would be a one-time waiver. So this year, see if you did save money as a village, if you didn't spend all your money this year, and an incentive not to, you could keep that extra money over the 15% cap, which is currently in effect. And then, so depending on the priorities of each village, that would allow them to have a nice cushion going into 19. That money from the 18 excess could only be spent in 19, so it's not sequestered like the other money. So again, on page 7, you would see how that's going to be calculated. We can't calculate the current year because it's not over yet. So that's our team is kind of coming up with something that was a little creative outside, but still we cannot advise you in 19 then in 2021 what to do with the excess cash cap.
Sure.
So the last alternative approach, because 50% would be coming off to CA, aside from those 4 villages, every other village would be getting less. Is that correct?
They would be getting an amount that they haven't gotten before, so it's not less. They're getting $24,700.
Less than the first proposal.
No,
It's the same.
It's the same.
As our first proposal.
Yeah, our
It's less
50-50.
than what some villages are wanting.
So this.
No, so my understanding is of the full contingency fund, which the first proposal was that it be dispersed 10, or so it's the second proposal, that it would, one possibility is that it go back to all of the villages evenly split, or possibly with CA as an 11th.
Okay, that was never our proposal.
That's when you say our.
The committee's proposal was never that. It was 50-50. There are
Villages in CA.
Villages want 11-way or 10-way, but that was not the committee's recommendation.
Okay, so but another element, another possibility from the villages was that the contingency fund, which was the villages putting in money year after year after year, and quite frankly, King's Contrivance has put back a lot of money into that fund, and we've never taken anything out. Some villages have over time. So all of that money that went in has been sitting there and accumulating year after year, and I certainly agree that this is way over what I think it needs to be. But the question of how it goes back, this sweetens the pot for some villages, but not for others.
Oh, okay. Yes,
right.
your
So that's
opinion.
yes. Okay. Yes, that is an opinion.
And where does that, if the amount that each of the 10 villages gets remains the same as your first proposal, these 4 villages that are getting more, is that coming out of CA's share?
So no, it's a total share. So each village, there's if we had taken the money for 17, if we had returned it back to the contingency fund, there'd be $550,000 in that fund today. the parts that were came out of those 4 villages would essentially be set aside for them. The rest of the money that went back into the contingency would be split the equal way, 50% to the CA and 50% among the villages. That's what the arithmetic shows you on page 7. And actually, if you want, I can show it to you here, but it's very hard for you to see. So that's why.
Nancy, you had a question there.
Yeah, well, I was about the contingency fund. So in order for the villages to not be constrained and be able to prepare for eventual emergencies, for example, wouldn't it make sense for the contingency fund to be divided just amongst the villages, and then they would be able to invest that money?
That's a discussion
illuminating
for
the
board.
cap.
I think that's
Had
something
you
for you
talked
all to
about-
discuss.
That's for the
No,
board to really
But,
decide.
but my question is, did you talk about them having money to then invest? Was that a
I
question that
am
was
not your
raised?
investment counselor, so I would not like to give that advice.
Oh, okay. So you didn't talk about that at all.
You have a question on the briefing.
Yeah. But it's just, I think, from Shari's question, and maybe Alan, there's a concern that if we go with this alternative that allows these 4 villages to retain money that they otherwise would not, that somehow that's being done at the expense of something the other villages would get. And I'm just trying to, I don't know if we got a clear answer. Is it just that these 4 villages are getting a little extra, or is it also that these 4 villages are getting something extra, and the other 6 villages are losing something?
So yes, so if you're looking at the column, the $60,000 of the 4 villages, so they are retaining $60,000. It's not going back to the pot and being divided among all the villages. So yes, they are getting a slightly bigger share of the contingency fund, if you want to say that. I mean, am I correct?
And if you went back into the pot, it would only amount to about $3,000 more per village.
Yeah, it's not a big thing, and this is our way of trying to, have something that we thought might be workable, and if you look at the amounts of money, and then in the report, we also have a document which I'd like you to look at. It's the last appendix before the comments, again, and it shows what the excess cash reserves on hand are today for each village.
Right.
So that would give you a sense of where they are. So it's not like some villages have quite a lot, and some have still tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So it's not anyone that has no money.
Right, and that was my next question. For each of these proposals, I mean, what my problem is, just my opinion, is that we have a significant chunk of money that's just being parked, not used.
Let's sit down, I think it's your discussion now.
And my question is, how big is that number under each of the proposals? Essentially, money that's just being parked out there at the villages, unused, and under the current system, where are we? If we go with the original staff proposal or committee proposal, what would it be? If we go with, various things, can we see how much that is?
Yes, certainly can do
That
that.
would be.
Well, obviously, I mean, if you want me to go, obviously,
Would you step up to the mic?
the smaller CA's portion of the split, the larger portion goes out to the villages.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
So that you're calling it parked. I'll use that term. So more money is going to be parked in the villages. I mean that in terms of the options of splitting the contingency.
Well, Greg, what do you mean by parked funds? Are you talking about contingency, or are you talking about money that
I'm talking about a combination of at the end of this exercise, okay, if we go with door number 1, how much is parked at the villages? And by parked, I mean, it's in an account that they get to use. And right now, what Jane pointed out, I saw this earlier at Appendix C, is right now what's parked there, and I think there's only part of it, is $916,000. In addition to that, I believe we have
cash reserves.
That's actual, not part. That's actual.
Yeah. So
400,000.
where's the?
Okay, yeah,
That's not the
what Greg is. But
That's
what
my
Greg is
point.
meaning
It's
is that the
sitting there.
villages will have 900. They right now they have
In addition to
$900,000.
that, we have $417,000 in the contingency fund. Okay, I call that parked money, that combination, 1.3 million.
Right.
Okay, and so now I know what it currently is under the current scenario. We got 1.3 million sitting there. Okay, as Nancy would say, a village endowment. And my question is, under each of the proposals, what does that number become?
Right. I think we could. So I think we don't have to do it now, but we can. And that's
Right.
easy. If we had 10 minutes, we could just go and do
Right,
that.
if you can get the number. Lynn, please come up to the mic.
What you just mentioned in the contingency fund, we're just talking about where it would be parked. So that amount is what you're looking at currently, and you just mentioned. The subsequent change would be in the cap on the excess reserves that would be allowed, permitted to stay in the village accounts.
Right.
And be parked there instead of with CA, for instance. And the impact of that overall, right now, using FY17 numbers that we just received, the operating reserve, when you add up the operating reserves at the 15% cap, it's $765,000 rounded. Our proposal was to double that to a 30% cap, given that the contingency fund would be split 50% CA and 50% amongst the villages. And that 30% is obviously twice the 15%, so it becomes $1,531,000 out at the villages.
That's the total?
That's the excess reserves permitted at the villages for the calculation that we do
Okay.
every year.
Okay.
And then if we were to consider a 50% cap, which was also one of the village requests, it would take that money up to $2,552,000.
Okay.
But it shouldn't matter which proposal we're talking about.
Wait,
I'm sorry.
Janet.
That is permitted. That doesn't mean the villages would have that. They would be permitted to have it. So it would vary every year by village and whether or not they're trying to establish, if they know they have some sort of long-term commitment that they need
But-
to pay for, they may have a higher reserve that year.
I guess what I'm asking, just to clarify, what I'm asking is, as far as what we know, not the potential. Those are definitely good figures to know what it could be.
Right.
But I guess I'm saying, like, next year, under each of these options, what is that number actually going to be?
It shouldn't.
So could you just give us?
Yeah, what
go
I
back
understand
and
the
work
question
on
to
the
be is,
spreadsheet?
if it's 50%, if it's if it's a 1/10 share, if it's 11th share, if it's 50%.
Right now, we know if nothing changes, we have 1.3 million parked at the villages. Right, 916 plus 400 and something thousand.
Well, half of the 400,000 will be under their proposal to be part of
I'm
the
saying if
CA.
we don't do anything.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm saying under the current scenario, current regime, we got 1.3 million parked out there doing, in my opinion, very little. And so just under each of the proposals, just be interested to see
Only if
what
villages
that turns
max
into.
out
I
their
think, yeah,
reserves.
okay. So I think, I
It's
just,
not an if, I don't,
the cash that the village has and that's called the reserves that are allowed, they can do whatever they want. It's parked, but they could decide, to, hire another person or that's versus the contingency, which is parked because it's not being used. It's a little bit, a little bit different, but I understand what you mean. Altogether, we can add it up for you.
Yes. So if I understand what Greg would like, it's a spreadsheet which basically shows under the different scenarios for splitting up the contingency fund, what would end up being the total cash reserves for each village. Okay, because right now it's 916, and we're proposing to give them either 24,000 each or 48,000 or something. So under each of those,
right, with no with no
what
giving
they do
back
with
of
it
the
is
cash,
immaterial.
no waiver of
Right.
none of this alternative proposal. Just if you weren't allowing anybody to keep
Greg,
their.
I thought you were defining parked as whether it's in CA's hands, the contingency fund's hands, or each village's
Not
hands.
CA's hands.
No,
What's
no,
parked
we
out
don't.
at the villages? What's parked out at the villages?
So if we use their recommendation, I'm trying to understand this. So if we use their recommendation of 50% to CA and 50% to the villages, for you, the 50% that goes to CA is no longer parked.
Correct.
Thank you.
Um,
I misunderstood that.
And,
Thank you.
yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is I want to thank Craig and Jane for giving us a quick overview. Our discussion. First off, remember that the committee said that their starting point was to produce a formula that was easier to understand. Does not discourage village association revenue growth, and reflects the size and mission of each village association. So I think their formula did. Now, their formula is proposing two parts, a mission association share and a facility share. So what does the board think about that? Let's just talk about that. That's the proposal to kind of have two parts. So, what does the board think?
I think it makes sense.
Okay, I mean, I just, yeah, if you're happy, that's fine.
The contingency thing is a separate conversation.
We're going to get to the contingency fund. I'm working my way through the formula to see if, I mean, like, from what I'm hearing is people kind of said, oh, okay, having two parts is fine. So then we don't have to discuss that. We can go on to the next.
At the risk of admitting that I haven't read every single word of everything, has any village said that doesn't make sense to them? Or did the villages agree with that?
I don't
There's a lot of comments in, and we summarized those comments and responded to each one, but you also had each of the comments. So there were some suggestions to change some of the parts of the formula.
As those two
No,
being the
no
big
one
buckets.
said that that was-
Nobody
no
said
one
there should
said
be
it
a
was
third bucket, or those aren't the right two buckets. Thank
No,
you.
I don't remember anything about that. It was
Yeah,
all about
looking
small.
at the comments, I don't think there was really anything in terms of
No
any
one-
objections to the two. But I'm offering the board. I mean, it's the board's decision.
I understand.
So what I'm hearing, because there's no decision, is no discussion, is two parts sounds good. Okay, let's talk about the parts. All right, so let's talk about now the mission share, mission association share. So if you remember, it consists of a base amount, a village manager credit, a covenant credit, and a population credit. And so, Alan.
So, at the risk of, I'm not sure, getting the evil eye from my village manager. I am, at this moment, partly because it fits with my professional life, convinced that equality does not mean equity. And so, while I agree with that those are some correct pieces, population, whatever, not every individual is created equal. Not every need in a village is created equal. When I was a teacher, I don't know what happens today, but if you had special needs kids, they were worth more in an allocation than another kid. And so in terms of what a school got, the school's budget would be determined by its needs, not by just the number of heads that happen to show up. And so I wonder, around things like village income, around things like average age, and those are just the two that pop to me. There may be other elements that would make one or another village more expensive to operate than another village. And that's ignored by this formula, and it makes, it privileges the younger, more wealthy villages, or whatever other criteria. That it doesn't give them more, but because it costs less to, my assumption, costs less to serve some people than it does to serve other people, it ignores that fact and allows the villages where the per capita actual cost is less allows them to have more to work with. And so I would like to see more things added to make more equitable adjustments to the formula.
Jenny?
Yeah, I'm not sure we'll have the answer tonight, but I think the other to piggyback what you're saying, the other part is also the ability of like an older facility, and I'll use the barn as an example, to actually produce revenue when you can, you'll look at we have X square footage, but the fact is you can't rent the upstairs and the downstairs when you only have bathrooms downstairs. You can't have, people going through to, especially if they need to get to the elevator, ADA requirements, et cetera, going through somebody else's party, it doesn't go over big. So you're really only renting part of a building every time, yet you're looking at it and you're thinking, hey, they got X amount of square feet, 2 levels, it should be a great revenue producer. The reality is that's not the way it functions. So, we're trying to figure out how do you fit that into your formulas.
Yeah, I only didn't mention that because we're talking about
Cost.
mission versus facility.
Right.
And facility comes in the next chunk.
Okay. Well, I thought I'd get it in the end.
So what I would actually not necessarily agree with you, Alan, because I'm looking at, the mission is share. And the mission share basically does a village manager, and every village needs a village manager, and it really doesn't depend on how big your village is or how many housing units you have. And the village manager does kind of all the same thing from village to village. And so I say, no, I can't see any real justification. Everybody has a village manager. We had a salary study. It's not an arbitrary figure, which is good. There's one thing I like about this. These aren't arbitrary figures. They pulled them from somewhere, mostly real numbers and good justifications. The base amount of the fixed operating expenses are all taken from the actual numbers. So I have a hard time arguing against the actual numbers. We kind of know what the villages spend.
What page you're looking at as you look down?
The A1.
What's this one? Whatever this one is.
Appendix A1.
It doesn't have a number.
It doesn't have pages.
So it would be page
Appendix
9.
A1, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm looking, operating business, insurance, other printing, donations, taxes, and like, a bunch of those things are really kind of dependent on how a village wants to operate, which is another thing. I've always been a proponent of, I'll give the villages money, but I'm not really going to put strict requirements on. Each village runs things slightly differently, and that's fine. Each village is unique, and they can make their choices. But I do think that, having the actual expenses and the way they did them, which was tossing out the high and the low, which is the outliers, doing the average, works well. Now, when you get to the covenant credit, that's based on the number of properties, and I really do think it should be based on the number of properties. And then lastly, the population. And the population is really like newsletters, and that's being how you communicate. And once again, what they did is they used actual numbers. And you can tell different organizations, different villages communicate different ways. You can see their numbers if you look on the next page. And you can see how they do newsletters, how they do special events. But once again, what they did is they took a average, and I'm not sure where already I would say that the income of the people, the people which we don't really know, we have no real way of knowing. We can catch the people, we can guess the population, we can catch the properties. But a lot of that is already incorporated into what villages do right now. And since we're using the numbers they gave us, it's not like we made up numbers. You can look and see the way different amounts of money people spend on newsletters. And different amounts of money people spend on special events, but once again, they did the same thing. They treated it as an average. Anybody else? Greg.
I just want to go back to Oakland Mills and what we heard, this idea that I think it sounds reasonable that we have a facility where essentially the max rentable square footage is not the same as the max square footage because you really can't use it like other facilities do. So they've got all the costs associated with that, but they don't get the benefit associated with that you would expect because they got extra rentable space. And if that is true, verifiable, then why can't, and if there's other villages in that position, why can't we come up with some type of multiplier, some type of factor to accommodate without blowing up the entire formula, but just say we have a special situation at Oakland Mills that justifies some type of a multiplier because we again to compensate for that.
Milton?
Well, first thing, I think that's not a part of this because we're not talking about the facility. But if you want to address it, Oakland Mill, just like any other village association, have no cost tied to the facility greater than $1,000. Anything above $1,000 is CA costs.
Right, but this
The income is limited.
the income is left out of this, and I get that.
Yes.
But it's left out of it because I think there's an assumption under there that every village is getting their income on the facility is proportionate in proportion to the cost that we are taking into consideration. And so if in Oakland Mills you have a special situation where, we're correctly calculating their costs and whatnot, that base assumption that they're going to be getting a certain amount of income based on that square footage, if it doesn't hold true.
But income is not a factor here.
I know it's not a factor, but
Janet had, I think, her hand up.
No.
Go, sorry.
Just a clarifying question, and I probably should have asked Sandy this, but the $1,000 we're referring to, I think that's in that time that you're bringing out the maintenance at $1,000 and you take over. But it could be somebody comes out to fix the elevator and we got to pay $500, so you're not going to pay. Something else, a dumbwaiter to $300. But when you do it many times during the year, it adds up to more than 1,000, but you can't bill CA, right? Because it's not 1,000 shot at that time. But at any rate, I hope in the future maybe you want to look at some of your older buildings like that and maybe think about gutting it and renovating it. Because you're spending a lot of money right now, but that's a separate issue. Am I wrong on that? I thought that's what Sandy was telling me happens.
But you can have 3 elevator repairs in 2 weeks, and each one is under $1,000. So you're paying $1,500, $1,800 in repairs. Most of our repairs are under $1,000. But when you add them up for the same piece of equipment, even over a month, it exceeds.
That's what I just explained.
Yes.
The thing I don't understand, though, is you're not the highest village.
Right.
You're only the 4th highest. There are villages that spend far more money on repairs and maintenance than Oakland Mills. No, I mean, I
don't think we should get off on that, guys.
But I mean, it's just, it's like Milton
No,
is.
but the other factor that no one wants to put on the table, there's no rent. You have all of these CA facilities, not a penny of rent.
That's true.
All right, let's go back to the Mission Association
Alan
share.
said that I was
Alan,
um,
we'll get to the facilities.
Yeah. So to leave the facilities aside, the covenant credit is still, according to this formula, based on number of properties. And without a lot of knowledge, but I think it's an educated guess, I would make an assumption that some villages, based on a lot of factors, whether it's age of properties, income of residents, renters versus owners, whatever, all the factors that go into whether properties stay maintained or not, that one property is not equal to another property in terms of the cost that a village incurs in terms of time and attention from its covenant advisor, and whatever other costs are associated to address whatever concerns. So to me, that's a baseline, but then I would like to see a more fine-tuned formula that accounts for issues in different villages, because I think we as a board and each village, because I love the village it was, Oaken Mills, their mission was not just about health, safety, good of the owners of property in their village, was also the residents of the community of Columbia. And so I think we, as all of us, owe it to all residents to look at all villages and all residents. So if it costs less in Harper's Choice to address covenant issues per property than it does in another village, then we ought to participate in helping out that other village.
Lynn.
Things like that change. Villages change, needs change. This is at least predictable. I think it would be very difficult because you'd have to adjust those assumptions on a regular basis.
Yeah. Just one clarifying question here. When you develop this number of properties, is that purely residential, or it's commercial as well?
It's all village properties within a village geography, whether they're commercial or residential.
Okay. Now, some villages, are there about 4 that they actually have responsibility for making sure the covenants are met, where the others don't? So what I'm trying to get at is, are there some villages that actually are required to do more properties than other villages? That may be the real issue, and I don't know how
So
you
we
do it.
included that. Essentially, that's accounted for.
So you're doing the whole thing as every village you're assuming has commercial
Yeah,
and
yeah, right. That parsing of properties at that level is something beyond our ability to calculate. So,
okay, I just wanted to understand
yeah,
what
the
you
amount
what
of,
this
amount of
figure-
commercial
okay,
covenants
thank
out
you.
there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, once again, I don't want it to get lost on the fact that when it comes to covenant, the covenant cost for the villages is basically in your personnel. Anything beyond your personnel
right, you
and
take it.
enforcement, CA takes it over.
That's right.
300.
So the other thing I would like to, because I have been way involved in covenant enforcement for years on Brown. Yeah, it's the personnel cost for basically the covenant advisor in that. I mean, almost everybody follows exactly the same process. You go out, you inspect a house, and whether it's a new house or a 50-year-old house, you inspect the house. You have your guidelines, you measure against it, you send a letter of compliance, you send whether there's a violation or not. It doesn't depend on the income, because once again, and if you've been remember Monday, treat everybody, every property the same. We do not distinguish anything at all based on income on covenant enforcement. So that's not, what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to treat all the properties equal. And so I'm not sure that there really is a difference, a noticeable, significant difference, depending on how old a house is or not. There is certainly a difference on how many properties you have to look at. I mean, there's certainly a difference there, and I will agree with that. And Lynn, did you have your hand up?
No,
Or is it- Oh, somebody over there had their hand up. Okay. Alan.
Then what I need is somebody, whether it's Jane or Milton or somebody, to give me a rationale for why. Here's where I'm left. Let me make the statement before I ask the question. I'm left with making an assumption that up until now, and I'm going to use this word advisedly, and I know it's a pejorative word, that up till now, Oakland Mills has been spendthrift and has spent too much money, more than they should reasonably do per person or per property or per whatever, which is why they're going to go down whatever the percentages were, 10%, 13%, whatever it is, than what their proper share, their proper expenses should have been. And so I need, and I'll own spendthrift is my word, you don't have to use it, but I need an explanation, because what I heard from their chair is that they have needs that don't exist in the same way in other villages, and they've been meeting those needs, and it therefore costs them more, and this is going to put a hardship on them. So I need that reconciled.
I will say, if you look at the information provided by the villages,
Give me a page, please.
the one that was given out at our last briefing, which is the consolidated, looking across all the community associations for the fiscal year 17. Basically, over half, almost 6%, maybe 70% of all the expenses is in salaries for every village. I mean, it's just that's where the money goes. And that is solely at the discretion of the village board. How many people they hire, whether they're full-time or part-time, whatever they pay them. You know, so 67% of the expenses really differs from village to village depending on how a particular village has decided to do its
Or
staffing.
the needs they have, that they need different kinds of staff. I go back to my school example. The reason why a special needs kid gets extra money is not because that kid's, by themselves, it's because extra staff is needed to
But we're
take
not
care of
doing
that kid.
anything like that. We aren't basing any of our staffing on extra needs or anything like that. It's on running the building and on managing the association. Milton.
Now, I guess, Alan, trying to address part of it, if you want to use that term need, some of the villages have, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have a full-time covenant advisor and may have a part-time. So they acknowledge they may need more personnel into that covenant, so they have more covenant personnel. That's the need that they can address, and that's the decision that's made by that particular village association's board.
Like, I mean, I can tell you some villages choose to have part-time covenant advisors. Some choose to have a full-time covenant advisor. And then those costs are different. Okay. But that's really, and this is one of the areas where I really don't want to get into. I do not want to go into how a village runs their particular, I mean, I want to stay out. They're all independent associations. They have a certain amount of money, and they get to choose how they wish to spend it to service their residents. Great.
Yeah, again, looking at that handout, and I think it's also included in the presentation tonight, on the mission-related expenses of each village.
Yeah.
And I hate picking on Oakland Mills.
Oh, go ahead, Sandy's here.
Well, and I hope you know I'm not picking on anybody, but someone said, and I heard tonight, and I thought it was very persuasive. We give all these donations.
They don't give that much.
Okay, $4,500 in donations. We got Owen Brown, giving out over $11,000.
Yeah.
Okay, but I don't hear them saying, well, we won't be able to do this if we do this. Where I see Oakland Mills being at the pinnacle of something is on this printing. 13,000. I mean, every other bill.
If we classify things differently in printing, that's my thing. It's like if I drill down into,
Yeah.
we have a printing category and then other printing. So I would probably drill down into that.
Because I don't understand why the village, you take that out, and the other villages average, easily under 1,000, and Oakland Mills is still up there at 13,000. And I look at that as well, this idea of needs. I don't know if there's a need there as I would define it. I look at those as choices in many cases. And if a village, as Andy said, if a village wants to make certain choices, I'm not going to tell a village it can't. I'm not going to tell Sandy she can't spend $13,000 on whatever these turn out to be.
Newsletter.
Okay, but either way, I'm not going to do that. I don't think it's our choice to do that, or our role to do that. So to me, it just comes down to, does this make reasonable sense? And then we push the ship away from shore and let the village, each village, do with it as it chooses. And to me, nothing jumps out at me as being at least in this part, as being unfair or inequitable, or whatever word you want to pick.
Any other discussion on the mission association share? All right. Move on then to the facility share, and what the committee recommended is using janitorial, utilities, and repairs and maintenance. and they propose using the 15, 16, and 17 actual expenses. In this one, they included all of the expenses. They didn't throw out highs or lows.
They did not throw highs and
They
lows?
did not. Well, they used all the actual expenses. Let's see. I assume it's because janitorial, utilities, repairs, and maintenance are actual.
Yeah, well, we didn't
Craig?
see that there was much.
Craig, could you? Since we're streaming this,
Yeah,
I need everybody to kind of go to a mic.
So in this category, we didn't see these expenses as much discretionary, where our village would have as much of they wouldn't have as much option in terms of these expenses. So that's why we decided not to throw out the highs and lows and just simply use the total amount. And then we felt like that also provided us with a really good dollar multiplier per square foot. What are we really as villages collectively spending per square foot on these categories?
I mean, in a sense, yeah. I mean, it just is simply going to cost more in utilities to run Stonehouse than it is going to cost to run Owen Brown's community center. I mean, it's just significant difference in buildings. So, all right, Alan.
I just want to make sure this is said in this part because it belongs here. This formula assumes that 1 square foot is equal to another square foot. And so, to take Oakland Mills as the example, they may have X square foot, it covers 2 floors. They have whatever it costs. They always have that cost, even if they're only renting 1 floor, to do utilities on both floors, but only 1 floor is giving them rental, whereas in a Taylor Hall, we've got 3 spaces we can rent out simultaneously, more if you count our lobby, and so we get more income per square foot. So for me, a square foot is not equal to another square foot, and that's something that needs to be added back into this formula.
Susan.
Jane,
did you want to go ahead?
Well, so this is the cost to operate the space regardless of the use. So if the use and the opportunity to rent has no relationship to this. This is just what it costs to, and what the village says it costs to clean, maintain, and heat and cool and provide water to that space. So it doesn't. There's no relationship to the rentals.
So the villages that have more square footage get a lot more money. So the village that has the most square footage is Long Reach, and they get a lot of money, versus a small village that has fewer buildings, they get much less money. So Oakland Mills is somewhere in that mix, right? It's bigger, more facilities, but Long Reach obviously is the highest. So it's really unconnected to how much money they can receive. But the bigger villages like Oakland Mills is getting 95, but Hickory Ridge, which is has the 1 building, they only get 32,000 in this formula. So the bigger villages with the more square footage get better in this formula, not less.
So I'm not getting the disconnection.
You're talking about that
by the end of the year. So if we get Village X gets a certain amount, Village Y gets a certain amount, but then they do get income from renting things, and if Village X gets to rent double the rent, they end up much farther ahead than Village Y does, and so Village X has more to work with to do whatever than the other village does. So I don't see how they're disconnected.
Well, we just didn't take income into account this formula at all.
Well, I get that, but I'm saying.
So last time around, there was a very complicated formula, the ideal village 1, 2, 3, and some people got more money because they had certain kinds of facilities. Incredibly complicated and very qualitative, and I know, if I may, I know that the formula, we're looking at it compared to last time because of the current formula, because that's what we have. But they're like apples and oranges, So the one before whether it was correct and right, I think we wouldn't be looking at it again if it were correct and right. You would say, just let's do it again. So I think it's some people, some villages are getting a different amount, and that's what you'll have to struggle with, and why the committee tried to make some accommodation for those who are getting a different amount by phasing it in, as well as some of the other recommendations. But I think, the income, how to project how much income somebody could and couldn't make, and how to set the bars where there would be a disadvantage. Somebody might say, okay, I don't have to make that much money, I'll slough off. Not that anybody would do that, but it just, so we felt, again, the formula is based on the expense side of the formula, what you need and what you need based on the historical values of the audited financial reports of each village has done. And because we have 3 years of data, now it's a 3-year blended average. So we feel pretty good about that data. If there's a quantifiable thing that you'd add, we struggle with how would you say if an older village, whatever, but all the villages are older. Like, what's the difference between 35 and 40-year-old building? After 25 years, they're all old buildings. So we just really couldn't, how do we quantify? Double it? Triple it? What would be the number?
Hi, Chow.
Hello. I want to weigh in about the data and the formula.
Sure.
And definitely, I think that a simpler formula will be very much easier for everybody to understand. However, simpler doesn't mean just A or B. We can have a linear combination of, for example, and 0.20% A plus 80% of B, and it makes the formula to reflect the reality better. So that's my point. I think everybody wants it really simple, but we just couldn't use one rule to fit everything. A linear model has the difficulty to fit a very complex model. Instead, we can have some flexibility in the model, which does not increase the complexity of the model.
Thanks, Chow. Anything else?
So that's my point. I think, and we talk about, for example, the printing cost, right? The printing cost is not a linear relationship between how much you print and then how much it costs. There's for example, if you print 20,000 pages, or if you print like 100 pages, the cost is not 20 times of 100 printing cost, right? It's not a linear relationship. Then when you think about it, with the formula, we can reflect the true cost of everything which is related to the operating cost of a village. And we can come out with similar formula for other facility costs or even survey costs. We can do that, and we can do much better on that.
Okay. Any other comments then on the facility one?
Yes. So my point is, we just couldn't think just one number to fit everything. Instead, we should think about either more complex model, but it's a complete or better model. It does not increase the whole formula's complexity, but it can model the system better, much better than the one we have right now. And our village board has sent a lot of response. And none of our suggestions, none of our feedback has been reflected in the revised and the final version of this formula. And all our village board members feel really not happy on that.
Nancy.
I just wanted to praise this process and the way they came up with it, because I think it's very clear and it makes sense. I can understand that villages, first of all, they're all individual, and second of all, they prioritize different things. Therefore, some might be more unhappy and some might be happier because they might have to get things will have to change. Their budgets might have to change a bit. But I don't see any dramatic change. I don't think anybody's going to be hit really hard. I just think it makes a lot of sense and it's clear and easy to understand.
Okay, let's move on then to the contingency.
Andy, can I ask a question?
Yes, Chow.
To Jan Dembler. Jan?
Yes.
So my question is, after you get all the feedback from the villages, which kind of changes did you make to the like before the final formula comes out?
Yes, we those are in the report. There are numerous changes, so I won't repeat them all, but they are documented in the report. We made changes to the population. We made changes to the covenant part. We made changes to the square footage. What other things did we do? We changed the data that we use from 16 to a blended 15, 16, 17. Yeah. And
Okay, great.
so there
Okay,
are
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. There were a number of good suggestions.
Contingency fund. A number of different options.
Now, can I say
Yes,
something?
you can. We're on to contingency fund.
So, because the contingency fund is going to go away, and because nobody knows what's going to happen 5 years or 3 years or even 2 years down the line, I think it would make sense, since the villages make X amount of dollars and depend a lot on CA. And if there's no more contingency, first of all, I think they should get the 30% rather than the 15% if they get anything. But it makes sense to me that that is removed altogether and that they be allowed to keep whatever portion that, because you want to encourage them to not spend down to the last dollar so they don't have as much to return to CA. Okay? So if they are encouraged to not spend down to the last dollar, but to put that money into an account for that eventuality that's going to hit everybody at some point in time, that makes more sense to me than punishing them by saying you've got to give us back whatever goes beyond X amount.
Alan.
So I would absolutely agree with that. And from my point of view, I have not yet heard an argument. So that's the cap. In terms of the contingency fund, I have not yet heard an argument that convinces me that since it was the villages that put the money in the first place, it shouldn't all come back to the villages. I mean, if CA wants to charge a 1% management fee or something to on it to take out, but it's that's real clear to me.
Well, for me is that I worked very hard to stay out of this. I wanted to have my input when we got to the discussion, but I don't have a point of view what you do with the contingency fund. If it all goes to the villages, however, there's $785,000 that CA covers on behalf of the villages. Now, if you're going to give all the contingency and you're going to raise the cap, could the villages be grown-ups and take care of themselves? Not have this $785,000 that CA is still picking up for them?
Are you really asking me?
No, I'm just.
Oh.
Because you posed the question.
Well, if you want them to be the grown-ups, then they should get their assessment share to spend. And they get it through you. I mean, through us, through CA.
What do you mean by get there? They are getting their assessment share.
Because CA allots it to them.
But the villages are not in a position to collect it.
Well, exactly right. And that's why they need CA.
Well, yes, and just like Alan said, we could charge 1% management fee.
Well, you could.
Great.
Yeah, Nancy, with all due respect, this to me just seems funny. It's as if some people want, the villages want all the benefits, but none of they want 100% of the upside, but as little of the downside as possible. I mean, it's a little extravagant. The village is the reason why it's set up the way it is, and we've all agreed to CA as essentially this master homeowners association, is that it's been in place, it's been decided that makes Columbia work best, right? That we have Columbia with this master association that does things like gyms. We have 3 gyms, not 10 gyms. We have 1 ice rink, not 10 ice rinks. Why? Because these things make sense. And this association pays for those. And so this idea that it was the village's money, yeah, you can say that, but the fact is we've come up with a system that works much, much better than if the villages were somehow running their own show and had their own amenities. It would be so inefficient. and it would be such a poor use of money if every village did that.
I
And
don't
so,
disagree.
And so to me, it's this idea of what is the best, and to take a sort of a zoning thing, what is the best and highest use of this money? Right now it's at 1.3 million sitting there, okay? The villages aren't paying for the gyms. The villages aren't paying for the pools. The villages aren't paying for your ice rink. The villages aren't paying for the pathways. They're not paying to pick up trash. They're not paying to mow. Milton's talking about very, very correctly all these other costs, personnel costs, things like that, insurance. But just face it, that we're the ones. And to me, the whole question is, what is the best use of this money? Historically, the villages have very rarely used this money, and say, yeah, well, we don't know what's going to happen next year and whatnot. Well, we know very well what's happened. The best evidence is what's happened in the past, and the past shows that this contingency fund has not been tapped into very frequently. And what I haven't heard from any village is the critical need that will go unfilled if they don't get as much as they want. If it's split, 10 ways. I haven't heard a village say, if you take your share, CA, we won't be able to do X and our residents will suffer. I haven't heard that. I've just heard this idea, well, we don't know what will happen. Well, in my mind, we know what has happened. And the fact is, we don't know what will happen. If a village has a true critical need, I mean, guess what that village can do? Obviously, come to CA and say, we need, as Ginny says, this our facility renovated. We have an elevator problem, it needs to be replaced. Those critical needs, they will come to CA anyway.
They did it.
So, to me, the question is, what's the best use of this money? And in my mind, given what the villages have put forward and what I know from being on this board, what we have to deal with in the coming years, the best use of this money is not just simply putting it back to the villages to park it there. It's to put it into residents' benefit, using that money for residents' amenities, resident services, residents' programs. You allow this 1 point whatever million to be parked to the villages, you're not benefiting residents. You're just not.
So good chance here. I think the time has come to abolish the contingency fund. And part of my reason is the villages collectively have over $900,000 in reserve, far more than even what the contingency fund has. I mean, if something happens, there's a ton of money out in the villages to handle things. I mean, I'm not even sure there's a need for a contingency fund anymore because they've built up. If we go, and that's at a 15% cap, if we would go and allow them to a 30% cap, then basically they could put aside in total 1.8 million. Because that's, I mean, at 15% they've got 900,000. At 30% they would go to 1.8 million, and that's a huge amount of money for any type of information. I mean, things that come up. If they want to put it away, they don't have to, but they can. So I am in favor of getting rid of the contingency fund, but I'm also in favor of keeping a cap, because otherwise, I do want the villages to be successful, and I want them. I don't want to quote penalize them, but I don't want them to become too profitable. I mean they're all nonprofits, and there is a tendency to. I mean, look, there's what, $70,000 sitting out that is supposed to come back into the contingency fund because some of the villages have been very profitable. I would prefer that we do keep a cap on it, just to kind of encourage the villages to remember that they're nonprofit and their job is not to accumulate vast sums of money. Dick.
We've been talking about $1 million out there. Sounds like one village has it all. Got to remember that these figures have to be divided by 10. And so if you think in terms of a village having $100,000 available in the event of an emergency, I think that might sound a little more reasonable. The other thing is that you like to think that the villages have a better idea of what their specific residents need because they're right there. And so somebody like, Oakland Mills was talking about how they have a lot of kids in schools on reduced income. So there's a definite need there, and it can't fit into the formula. So I would think that the individual villages might be able to take a look at just what their specific needs are for the village. The villages have not tapped into the contingency fund because it's kind of, I don't want to be greedy kind of a feeling. And so they haven't had really the incentive to get in there and try to get some money out of it. I think that it might be interesting to revisit this the next time we review the formula, which is, 5 years from now, and see what the villages have done with this money. And maybe it's just been parked, as Greg has pointed out, in which case we got to take another look at this. But maybe it's been spent in creative ways in order to benefit the residents of the villages. So I could see a cap. I don't want this to get completely out of hand, but I think it should be a pretty generous cap. And yes, CA does provide some important services, and maybe they should get a percentage of this, but I don't think half of it really makes a lot of sense. So that's my point of view.
Alan, and then Susan.
So I want to thank you, Greg. I thought that was very well confused. I said, like, very, very well reasoned response to what I asked for, and I would agree with you in terms of the goal is to what's best for the residents. So I think that we can agree on that. Hopefully, we can all agree on that and move forward. One of the goals of this whole effort, paraphrasing here, and if you want to change, correct me to the proper language you all used, was to encourage the villages to grow their income, their whatever, to encourage them to maximize their potential. And so I think, Dick, you've hit on something in terms of the contingency fund sitting there. I wish it worked better, but it hasn't worked better in terms of there was. I don't think people really thought out the mechanism for how to get money out of it and how to feel about that and think about that, and so the tendency has been for it to sit there. But I certainly can envision a village saying, we can look down the road, whether it's the short road that says, hey, in 3 years, we're going to be, if we're in Oakland Mills, we're dealing with a 10% reduction or whatever, so we need to park some money to account for that to help us over. I could see villages saying, we foresee we could maximize our potential around whatever if we set aside $50,000 a year, $100,000, whatever it is, and in 5 years, 8 years, or 10 years, we'll have $1 million, and we can then fund something we want to do that will improve our village, our residents' lives, and encourage each village to take that more under its own control. In terms of the cap, to me, the cap is a hedge against the formula being wrong, and I would rather see us have the cap, the hedge be the review after 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, than do a 30% or 50% or 10% or 50 whatever percent cap. If the formula is the formula, that's the amount that should go to the village, and that's theirs, and there's no cap, because the cap implies that somehow it's actually CAs that we're giving to the village. But if we're creating the formula, it's now the villages. And in terms of the contingency fund coming back, I get the CA in our budget. We do things for the villages. But contingency fund money has all come from money that, according to whatever formula was in place at the time, each village got. And then they put back into the contingency fund to benefit everybody, every village. And it's not like CA's also contributed an equal share into that. If in the future, so I think the villages ought to get all that contingency fund money back. If in a future formula we want to increase whatever it is that the villages, you're going to have to pay for your insurance, so you're going to have to contribute to whatever it is that is put out of CA's pocket. Then we should be willing to be grown up and say that's what we need to have happen and build it into the formula.
So I think if you look at what the whole community is doing, the whole community is funding cash to sit on the sidelines at a cost. And I just would like you to consider that. And I also think, we talk about the villages having this cash, with this cash, is there an investment policy that their boards have approved that how those funds are being invested, that there's emphasis on preserving principal or capital? CA has an investment policy that's really strict about how we manage those funds. Is that same kind of discipline in place? And especially as these monies grow, who's really paying attention to that? And what's the stewardship over that? So I would just throw that out on the table as well.
No, I just want to get a clarification.
And I also think
the contingency money is not sitting in a bank account.
Right, it's not.
It's only paper. I mean, it's only on paper. We do not have that money here. If we had to come up with it tomorrow, we'd have to go.
We would have it right now because of the annual charge.
Yeah, because you got the money, but otherwise, but it's not like so. It's not like there's, $400,000 sitting off in a bank account. It's kind of like Social Security. Yeah, they're promissory notes. Yeah. Sherry, you had to.
Yeah, I was going to say.
How are you going to share it
up
then?
on something that Dick had said. The thing about insurance is that nobody wants to pay it until you need it and then you don't have it. So the contingency fund was sort of set up as a kind of way of all of the villages pooling resources for the benefits of all of the villages. So that if something came up, and there have been cases in the past, we really haven't reviewed what those cases are. We've only we've been told that the numbers have been small. But maybe they would have been catastrophic for a particular village. When you look at legal costs, when you look at things of that kind. So I'm not really convinced that it's not needed. I think what isn't needed is the huge amount that's there. So I was thinking, what would happen if we held off 100,000 so that it's still there as that pooled resource that binds our villages together in this kind of agreement to help each other out, and the rest was dispersed because it's simply too large the way it is. I mean, I that's what I'm hearing from the group, is that everybody seems to agree that there's simply too much accumulated. That doesn't mean the idea behind it is necessarily wrong. My other concern is about health insurance included for village staff. I would really like to know that that's going to be the case for the next 10 years. As we keep looking at the uncertainty about health care, I can see that having a tremendous effect on villages if for some reason, that part went away. So I think as part of our negotiation, as we're thinking about 50% or 10% or how do we split this with CA, let's think about that too. There are very good reasons to link with CA as far as those health insurance costs are concerned, and to know that that's there into the future, and having a small amount much smaller amount in the contingency fund that we can lend each other if circumstances should arise.
Great.
Yeah, we should have $100,000 in contingency fund to prevent a catastrophic event. Right now, my village has $92,000 in reserve. I'll pick on my village, $92,000. What's the catastrophe? You know, we've never had it, and you know, we got Long Reach and Harper's Choice each sitting on $132,000. These are cash reserves. When we're going to allow the villages to keep these kind of cash reserves, and I think all the proposals allow huge cash reserves. The only question is how huge. You know, how big is the cake? Not whether they're going to have a cake. To me, there's no reason, no rationale for a contingency fund, and I'm okay with that because the contingency fund had this convoluted process to get authorization to use the funds. So if you over in King's Contrivance, if you had some need, you're like, oh my God, I really need to do this. You know, you're wringing your hands. You had to go around and get a certain majority of people on this contingency fund committee, whoever it was, to agree with you, or else you didn't get it. This is going to allow you to keep a larger cash reserve. You don't have to go to anybody else. Your village just gets to say, we have this problem, we have this need, we're going to decide to do it. I see that as that's far advantageous, a larger cash reserve for a village to address the need that you're talking about, Shari, as opposed to a contingency fund, which again requires something very different. But again, you use the word catastrophic. There is no catastrophe that I can think of when a village can always come to CA. And we're not ogres. I mean, I can't remember a time on all the boards I've sat on, all the board members, where a village has come in and said, my God, we have this, I mean, we might disagree, okay, the town center elevator, okay, but.
Or lack thereof.
Right. We want an elevator at the Oakland, but you know, things like that. But I don't remember a time where a village is coming here and say, my God, we have reached the point of catastrophe because we couldn't pay for something and CA refused to pay for it. So this idea we need this insurance, we need this, you know, I just don't see a record or evidence to support that. What I see is just this idea of the villages essentially want to have this endowment. And to me, it's just, I think the idea of villages having these endowments is entirely inconsistent of we as stewards of residents' money supporting residents. You think residents would like to know that 1.4 million is just sitting there unused? You think, what resident's not going to come back and say, reduce my annual charge? I'd rather have an annual charge reduction than these villages sitting on that kind of money. CA's not sitting on that kind of money. We don't do that. Why would we allow the villages to do it? I don't get it.
Ginny in and out.
Yeah, just, Jane, maybe, or Susan, you can help me with this. Currently, we're talking about 494,760. That's the contingency fund we're talking about. Why aren't we taking what would be this year, which would be the 500?
I'm sorry, what number did you just say?
7.
Yes.
What I'm trying to get at, the real figure in the contingency fund currently is X, and I think it's, I guess it's 494,700.
Total contingency fund,
Not the cash reserves, just the contingency fund.
The total contingency fund today is 417,000, but we have not collected what should be into the contingency fund from FY17 that just closed. We haven't billed the villages for that. If we had, then the total amount would be 555,689,000.
Okay, so why is it 494 here on page?
Because you're subtracting the 60,000 in the first column, which is the alternative that the committee suggested, which was that the 4 villages that would get a less share than they currently do would keep it. So if you add those two together, you get 555.
Okay. But my question then is, why aren't we working from a contingency fund of 555?
Because we haven't yet billed you. We haven't collected it yet, that's why.
All right, but when we're trying to think of how you handle the contingency fund, should this board be considering 555,000? I mean, I just want one figure and not two figures
Susan,
floating
if you'd
around.
like to answer that.
I don't understand what difference it would make.
Yeah, it
So we
doesn't
could go ahead and
A
bill.
million, about 100,000.
No.
Yeah.
So
This
we
is
could bill and collect the villages
Tomorrow.
and then tomorrow, right? And then we could go, and then you could go decide that you were going to give some of it back or allow these four to keep it, and we could pay them back. We just thought it made more sense to, while you're in the middle of this discussion, to hold off on billing and collecting
Okay,
them.
but if we, I'm just trying to understand this. If we hold off and we make a decision, okay, so you say we make the decision, but it would still be sort of based on the 500, no?
Whichever decision you like to make. So you just decide which way. If you decide not to refund
I'll-
any money to the villages, then we would bill it.
Right.
I mean, if your decision in a month is something different than the committee alternative, then we would go ahead and bill, and then you'd distribute the contingency fund however you recommended, and the contingency fund would be the 555 if we had billed it.
Maybe I'll just talk offline. I'm
Yeah,
just trying to find out if
it's
the
easy.
distribution is 500 or 470.
Whichever you decide.
Okay, thanks.
So, Milton, you talked earlier about, I
Get
forget
the
what you said, the
blanket.
elephant in the room is the thing nobody wants to talk about, which was rent. And villages paying rent for the facilities, and I think that's a reasonable conversation for us to have. I think the other elephant in the room that I apologize because I thought of this at the beginning of our discussion but didn't say anything, is, and we seem to do this a lot. We get into the nitty gritty of things without deciding what our criteria is, what's our sort of philosophical stance. So, Greg, when you use words like endowment or return money to, and you're not the only one who's used those kinds of words, the implication is that the money is CA's and we figure out how much we want to give the villages. There are those of us, and I say us because I'm one of them, who believes that the money is the villages, that there was an agreement long ago that it just made more sense for all the reasons people have talked about, for CA to be the banker, as the gentleman mentioned, and rather than having 11 different collections things going on, we have one collection thing going on, and then we need to figure out what's the best way to get the villages their money. Because each village does have the ability to collect the money, and we have all chosen not to in lieu of doing it this way. To me, the implication is clear. It is therefore the village's money. We've simply chosen this mechanism for the money to come from the residents to CA and then to the villages, but it's not like the residents to CA and then now it's CA's money to decide what the villages should get. So, to me, that philosophical question underwrites everything we're saying, whether we think it's an investment in a village to have that money sitting there that they can then use, whether it's for catastrophes or to build up a fund that they can then use for some future thing they want to do, or whether we see that as, oh, they're hanging on to money that we would be, it's really our money to be, and we're better stewards of it, so we should get it back to us. And I worry that because we haven't had that discussion, we aren't talking about that we're talking about the same dollars as if they're different things, and that makes a difference.
Yeah, and I'm not going to respond except to say I'm not going to respond to the philosophical as it CAs or as the villages, because to me it's irrelevant. It's the residents' money. Residents.
And businesses.
And business, right. It's the assessment payers' money, right? It's the annual charge, the annual charge payers' money. The idea the villages want to put themselves under CA, I mean, we're just acting on behalf of the residents. Susan said it best. So we don't, to me, I don't need to have that philosophical discussion. Whose money is it? Is it being returned? Is it not? It to me is where's the best place to put it to serve the people who paid it. And to me, the best place to put it is not a big chunk of money in every village just to sit there so they can feel better about it in case of a catastrophe that, to me, is just so rare to even, I wouldn't get, for other reasons I've talked about, It's just not there.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up. So as I said, we will have this on for a decision on our meeting in October. It's already on the agenda and everything. Because, I mean, it's a key part of the budget. I mean, we have to decide so that staff knows how much then to set aside to create the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And
Point of order then, what are we going to start from?
we're going to start from the recommendations. I mean, because that's what we have.
The alternate recommendation or the original recommendation?
Probably the alternate recommendation, from what I understand.
So the recommendation for the formula is unanimous, there's no alternate. That's the best job we felt we could do. And then there are the two quite different points of view for the cap and then we as a committee, acting on our own, came up with this alternative that we thought you might be able to agree with to come to a consensus on that. And then you also have to decide about the cap going forward, if you would take that alternative.
So are we going to treat all those as separate pieces, or is this going to start with here's the package, make amendments, or what's the?
I mean, it's all going to come as a package, yeah. I mean, and then like we did tonight, we can go through each section, each of the we can say, okay, there's two shares, and the first share has these components. And the recommendation is, base the first share on the following four components, I think. And then here's how you calculate the four components. And if you want to address that, you are free to put forth an amendment or proposal or something. But yeah, what's going to come before the board is in a sense the recommendations from the committee that was chartered to do it, and the board is free to make the modifications it wishes.
And may I say, in the appendix, that is the committee's aggregation of all the comments we got by topic. And so some of the things that have come up about the age of or the needs of the village, or the population age, we did respond to as best we could, So you could look there too to just say our reasoning and why we didn't take up one of those, or why we thought it was, something we couldn't calculate.
In those decisions, did you handle those as consensus or as majority vote within?
No, we voted not at all. We were all on consensus on everything except the parts that we couldn't come to agreement. So on everything, I mean, there were some heated discussions in the room at times, just about understanding. It's very complex. That's why we spent so much time on it. But the committee is still all here, and if you want to stand and say what your point of view is, but we were unanimous on the formula and all the parts to it. And some things varied back and forth as we talked over the last year, but we came out with the unanimous, and there was no equivocation on that.
Nope.
I'm very proud of their effort.
Thank you.
As the board member is going to make a final decision. And the biggest thing for me when this was told, this was an effort coming out, I talked to Jane. I'm the one that asked Jane to take over this responsibility or task, because I heard the comments that were brought to me about what happened in the past. The biggest thing for me, and I 100% believe the work team got there. They got before the board quantifiable information. Now the board can put your emotions in it, you can put your heart in it, and all those other non-quantifiable traits. But the committee got you where you want to be.
Committee got us quantifiable information.
Yes, that's what it's about. You're talking about money, Alan. That's where you start with.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate. And as I said, meeting in October, the fourth Thursday. This is when we make the decision. Okay. Lakefront core design guidelines. I was going to say, is there any real questions? If not, this is going to show up on the agenda in probably November or December, based on the timing, because we'll have more information then. So is there anything else I'm going to say? No. Good. Yes.
So when we vote on this proposal, is it going to be a series of votes for Is it a lump that we amend? I mean, how exactly is this going to be done?
Probably what we'll do is we'll get the series of recommendations, which is basically we'll take it parts. We'll take the formula, okay, and we'll take the contingency, and we'll take the cap. Well, there's also a couple of other things that they had recommended.
The
Okay.
individual
So they'll be
chunks
individual.
that we would vote on?
Right, they will be individual. So we'll vote on the formula, proposed formula. Now, if somebody wants to make an amendment, I mean, the formula has a lot of parts. And if you want to change a part, okay, yeah, we can make an amendment for that. But it's going to be a vote on the formula. It'll be a vote on the contingency fund, a vote on. Yeah. Okay, so we'll take the late front guidelines later.
And
For
this
your-
vote's going to happen on October 26th, correct?
The vote for the assessment report, yes, will be taken October 26th. And that's going to be a firm date because it's going to be hard to do the budget without knowing what.
Andy, I have a question.
Yes, Chow.
You talk about a committee. Which kind of committee? Who are in the committee talk about the changes to the formula?
The committee members were listed in the.
It was
Report.
Lynn Schwartz, who's our treasurer and director of finance, and it was Judy Goad, and she is the treasury operations manager, so financial excellence. And it was Kristen Schulder, who also used
Okay.
to Covenant.
Yeah, I think I remember the list. So my question is, can we still send an email to them, talk about our concerns or our suggestions?
No.
Committee is disbanded.
Yeah, the committee's done. They filed their report.
I asked if they would get together one more time. I thought we're done. We're done. So I think
Okay.
we're in your hands now.
Yeah, I mean, they sent it to the
They don't
board.
wanna
It's up
meet
to the
anymore,
board now
right?
to make a decision.
But as you said, so you mean the board make motions next time, make changes or adjustments? Is that right?
If yes, people can suggest changes. People can make motions, propose amendments at the October meeting.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Board meeting, October board meeting.
26th.
Yeah, whatever the fourth Thursday is.
26.
Okay. Thank you.
Dick and I will be on top of our game, having just had a 12-hour flight the day before. We will be here.
For China?
So don't expect much.
That's right. We expect to air. You have read every single background and.
Different time zone.
Okay. For your information, there were 3 articles. Particularly pay attention to the first one about the trend that we see in terms of fitness, because fitness is a big part of what we do. Yeah, so. Tracking forms. Any questions on the tracking forms? Nope. All right, talking points.
No. Andy, I have a question.
Sorry. Chow?
And I think I sent Jenny the question about the computer policy, and it was not showing in the tracking form. I'm wondering what the procedure for board member put the request on that one.
Well, Chow, quickly, Janet brought that to me. I'm going to send a response to the board because your question was about the board looking at how we computer policies, and so that I'm drafting a response that I want to share to the board. And that's why.
Okay. So my question is, if you think about you're dropping something, can you reply to me? At least let me know something is in the background and you're working on that. Otherwise, I'm not sure whether you got my email or doing something in the background, so that helps me understand and you're working on that.
Okay.
Not replying to my email make me just don't know what's happening there.
On to talking points.
The board approved changes to the charter for the Office of Internal Audit. The board discussed the assessment share work group's final report and recommendations.
That is it. Yep.
After all that, that's all we get.